Hey, there we are live, Anthony, back for another week, a 2-hour live podcast here, you guys, 10 a.m. Mountain Time each and every Wednesday. Anthony, it's been an action-packed week in the Bitcoin space. The miners have been off to a big start here to kick off really the middle portion of July. We're starting to get into that prime time window post-halving, which you've talked about so much on the channel. What do you make of the big price jumps this week?
There's been some great price jumps this week. A couple of standout ones. Cipher's had a really good run this week. Soluna's back on in a nice position as well, having reached a sort of like a really good price just over a month ago. I think it turned over $8.50. But yeah, we're seeing a lot of interest in the miners again, and not altogether correlated with the price of Bitcoin. So Bitcoin's still holding in that sort of mid 60 range. And the miners have had a really good run, so we're now seeing quite a lot more miners who are year to date positive now. So we go back a few months ago and there was only literally one or two miners. Now we're seeing many more miners are green from year to date. And bear in mind the Bitcoin price is up about 49% from year to date. So yeah, it's been a good week for news, and we'll talk more about that as we go on.
Yeah, it certainly has. You mentioned Cipher, so I want to get into that with our special guest, DR Lewis. Before we do, though, Anthony, you just mentioned the price of Bitcoin. We'll bring that up on the screen quickly here, you guys. Sitting just north of $65,000 US at the time I took the screenshot this morning. You can see over the past 5 days, you guys, up 7,300 or just under 13%. Very strong price action, really, since the Trump rally incident on the weekend, Anthony. We'll get into that with DR in a second here. But tremendous amount of attention. ETFs have turned on the afterburners once again, both the US side and obviously over in Asia as well, which we'll talk about, really driving a lot of demand for Bitcoin, hey?
Yeah, and as I say, this last 7 days or last 5 days in this chart here is looking good. But if you look at the last sort of 3 months, we've been in that sort of $60,000 to $70,000 range for quite a long period now. So we're looking for the next lift up. And we've talked before about post-halving in previous cycles. Normally 70 to 90 days, we start seeing movement. I know that Freedom by 40, who we've had as a special guest on a previous live stream, he's suggesting there's very much positivity in the Bitcoin price going forward. So we'll look to get him on the show again soon to talk us through that graph and what that looks like. That chart and what that looks like. But yeah, as I say, it's a good space at the moment. The mining stocks have really sort of like, there was a decoupling a few months ago. We were seeing the Bitcoin price rise to all-time high, and we weren't seeing the mining stocks perform at the same pace. Now we're seeing some of the mining stocks playing catch up, and some of that news is aligned to the HPC deals and forecasts that some of these miners have been putting out lately. I mean, we still harp on about the biggest news story of the year, which was the Core Scientific CoreWeave deal. That sort of like changed the narrative or the conversation that we're having today about mining companies moving into HPC space. And when the Bitcoin price rises to 150, 200,000, the narrative of the conversation will move back to Bitcoin then, because at the moment with this price of Bitcoin here, profits and revenues are a little bit more unpredictable. With the likes of HPC, you've got far more predictability.
Yeah, most definitely. It's going to be interesting to see how that narrative changes. Now, moving along to the next slide here, you guys, it's of course our special guest back for his second appearance. So DR, I'll flip you on here. Welcome to the live cast here, you guys. DR Lewis, you probably know him and follow him on X or Twitter community. Really starting to put together a strong following and strong community there through your Spaces events. So DR, I'll pass it over to you. You can give us a quick background on yourself and what you're doing in the space, and then we'll pick your brain here for the next couple hours.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to come on with you guys. I absolutely enjoy the content. Appreciate the kind introduction. I'm a retail investor. I don't consider myself an analyst, although I guess sometimes the lines blur because I'm not shy to give my takes. But I'm just a guy who really has fallen down the rabbit hole, enjoying learning about this sector and the potential and the upside As a Bitcoiner since 2020, I got into mining stocks about 2022. Started thinking about how these companies exist and they produce this commodity at cost and how there could be an arbitrage play there. And the last 6 months or so, I've decided to grow my platform on X, and it's taken a lot of traction. As you mentioned, Bryce, thank you much. I've been doing a lot of lunchtime spaces, my partner Adrian Morris, and we have one tomorrow with TeraWulf. That's the flyer up there. We're going to have the VP of Operations, Sean Farrell, and 99% sure we're going to have their Chief Strategy Officer, Carrie Langlace, and their CFO, Patrick Fleury, as well. The whole Wolf Pack. We're just advertising Sean for now because the others are traveling, and we want to make sure we have allowances for any last-minute things. But I think the whole pack's going to come in, and we're going to talk TeraWulf for an hour. That's really the format we've been doing, 1 hour lunchtime spaces. We have them lined up with pretty much everyone in the industry, from Soluna to Riot, Marathon in the next couple of weeks. So really fun to do these 1 hour alpha sessions. Having a great time with it.
Yeah, it's awesome. There's such an insatiable demand for information in this space, and it seems there's a lot of retail investors like myself and Anthony that have just really found a passion for Bitcoin. I got to tell you as well, DR, I love the artwork on all of your guys' flyers or display ads there. It's great. So the Wolf one is probably my favorite so far. Now, we want to get your take on a number of things. We were talking about some of the Cipher news and potential headlines there before we started recording. Quickly, though, before we get into the company-specific slides, I wanted to do a mid-morning market update here. So, Anthony, pretty explosive trading Monday, Tuesday. Today's more muted, a couple of companies in the green, but for the most part, kind of consolidation, a little bit of, I would probably say, healthy consolidation at this point. What's your take on the market this morning?
Yeah, we had a little move up on the upside when the markets physically opened, but within about 20 minutes, a lot of those gains were turned back into red. So Bitcoin price is, it's holding well at the moment. It's in a, like I say, you've had it's just under 65,000. So it's hovering that 65,000 the last couple of days. And Bitcoin. Remember, the Bitcoin mining stocks have had really good rises in the last 2 days. So maybe a little bit of profit taking today, but some of them are holding up well. There, you've got Hive and DMG in positive territory. We've seen the likes of even Argo Blockchain have some positive share movement in the last couple of days, which is welcomed. I mean, you're talking there of a company that had a market capitalization of about $1.3 billion back in 2021, and at today's valuation, they're 97 million. So, they're sort of like 8 or 9% of their previous all-time high market capitalization. But we know the reasons for that. But a new management team in there who've been driving cost reduction. So, close to my heart as a chartered management accountant, cost is key to me. And so bringing those costs down there, getting rid of as much debt as they can. And I think the debt now, the loan with Galaxy is getting close to being fully paid off. So they've just got the notes left, and maybe they can do some conversion with the notes and get rid of all the debt. And then it leaves them then to start operating, with a bit more understanding going forward. In the same ways, we saw the likes of BitFarms, we've seen the likes of TeraWulf. Once that debt gets removed from your balance sheet, the market like that, and we've seen those two stocks do really, really well since they both got rid of their debts. And I'm sure we'll talk more about those two later.
Yeah, we certainly will. Your partner, Adrian Morris, has arrived in the building here, DR. So we'll throw a quick shout out to Adrian on the screen, and also putting together great content alongside DR in the space. Now, DR, I wanted to get your take on the second column from the right here, the 52-week range. So Anthony just alluded, we've seen a lot of price action in the first couple days of this week. You'll notice that a lot of these companies now are trading towards the higher end of their 52-week range. We had Core Scientific, HUD 8 has been on a tremendous run. Wolf, CleanSpark starting to turn the gas on again here. What's your take on the sector overall? Do you think we're a little bit overextended right now, or do you think we're just starting to see some of this Bitcoin optimism come back into the space?
I don't know that we're overextended. I do lean more towards the optimism returning. You know, if you look at the 52-week highs and where we were a year ago heading into the winter was really into some of the depths of the bear market where we were buying shares of BitFarms for under $1 and et cetera. So the next year is really going to be what I've been looking for is the cycle. The end of 2024, the early part of 2025 is where we really start seeing positive price action. To your point, today we've seen 52-week highs in Cipher, Core Scientific, TeraWulf off the top of my head. And in the last week, we've seen a lot of these stocks that were very red for the year now turned into green territory in the year to date and starting to approach towards their 52-week highs. And I think that that's going to continue. It's never a linear line. I think today is a great day for consolidation. I've seen a lot of these companies run up 30, 40% the last 3 or 4 trading sessions. It's good to take a breath. This is the first one we've had in a couple of sessions. But I do think as we project into the fall, we're going to see 52-week highs on most of these tickers. It's interesting to me, and one school of thought is you try to pick the best companies, like Anthony was saying, doing a great job paying off debt, solid share structures, low cost, because they may be the biggest winners. But there's also a school of thought that in this cycle, everything Bitcoin related and all these miners are going to do very well as the price and the interest turns into the section. And I believe that the sector is primed for attracting a lot of eyes. Sometimes I think we get in our own little bubble, we forget how early it is. There's a lot of the general public who really isn't in tune with Bitcoin and certainly not the proxies yet. So these 52-week highs to me that we're setting, I think it's 3 or 4 times this week alone we've set the 52-week high for Cipher, for Wolf, for Core Scientific. We're going to continue to do price exploration.
For sure.
It's interesting you say that because, you know, just looking at those 3 that you've mentioned there, if we go back to the, I'm going back to the date that Core Scientific announced that amazing contract with CoreWeave back on the 3rd of June. I'm just looking at those 3 stocks. You know, you've got the likes of Wolf up 185% since that date. You've got Core Scientific up 126%. You've got Soluna up 173%. Wow. Cipher actually is up 80% since that date there, and actually they're booking the trend to a certain extent because I don't believe Cipher at the moment have actually stated they're going to go into the HPC space like some of the other miners. I think they're still at the moment pure play. But what we can see is, you know, if we look at all the mining stocks that have got HPC as current part of their business or future part of their business, the market's looked at that and give it some you know, actual benefit in the share prices. You know, at the bottom end of the spectrum and still in sort of like positive territory, but then you've got the likes of Marathon Digital, you've got the likes of Riot Platforms, you've got the likes of BitFarms and CleanSpark. So those 4 are pure play, although BitFarms in their latest monthly update have highlighted that the 120 megawatts facility in Pennsylvania is actually suitable for HPC as well as Bitcoin mining, although they haven't sort of like literally said we're going to go into HPC space. What they're saying is there may be opportunities to do that, whereas a lot of the other miners have said we are going into that space. So, you know, the likes of TeraWulf have said we've allocated space at Lake Mariner. We're looking at increasing that space. Soluna as well, they've already got theirs up and running now. They're actually starting to earn revenues now because the GPUs are in place there. We've both had Sam on the, you know, on the various platforms over the last few months, and Sam's great. You know, they're going to be bringing in $92 million of annualized revenue from August. Fantastic. The deal with Core Scientific only gets better with every announcement because they've still got another 230 megawatts to utilize of their 500 they've set aside for HPC hosting. And, you know, these types of numbers, and Bryce and myself are really fortunate to be on that coach going to Denton with 40, you know, of the Wall Street analysts. And, you know, we had like, because it was an hour's journey each way, we had time to speak to these guys, find out what they felt about the mining stocks. And it was apparent, you know, they were just there for HPC. They're not interested in the Bitcoin mining. So that was really an interesting take on what Wall Street think about it at the moment. But, you know, the Bitcoin price goes to 150,000. The conversation changes again. So, you know, great while it is at the moment, you know, and, you know, who knows where the Bitcoin price goes in the next, you know, 6 to 9 months.
Yeah.
Now, I want to talk about some of the recent catalysts in the media here because There's been a number of big updates this week, not only driving Bitcoin price, but also hash price. So before we get into some of these headlines and press releases, DR, I also want to get your take on Cipher. I wanted to quickly touch base on hash price, Anthony. So we talked about on our podcast, we bottomed out here, or hopefully bottomed out, I guess a couple of days ago or a week ago now. We're starting to flirt back towards the $54 range. Do you think the bottom is in on hash price, or are you still kind of, is the jury out there?
Well, obviously hash price is linked to Bitcoin price. So, we did see the Bitcoin price, drop into that sort of like into the mid 50s. And, inevitably that, your hash price, which is your revenue, the amount of revenue you're achieving per petahash per day. So, $43 per day for each petahash was the lowest, the all-time low for Bitcoin. And, now we're seeing it sort of get back towards the $53, $54 levels. That gives a little bit of breathing space. Now, we're dealing with the North American Bitcoin miners. And the one thing we can say about those miners, and bear in mind, the North American Bitcoin miners that we cover, and this doesn't even include all the North American Bitcoin miners, because, I look after about 15 or 16 of the miners. There's probably about, I think the last count was 32, 33 publicly traded miners. And then you've got a handful of really decent sized non-public miners. An example of that will be Corp. They're based in Texas, 2 exahash today. They announced they've achieved 2 exahash. 2 exahash in my tables takes them into sort of like, getting towards the mid-tier. So, they'll look likely to go for an IPO in the next 12 months. Quietly doing the business. They're in Texas. They've got, got great energy prices there. But this, going back to the North American miners as a whole, North American miners probably control something like 40% of the global hash rate, between 35-40% of the global hash rate. We know that because we know what the hash rate of these miners are. And if I'm only looking at 15 or 16, I did a look today, that was coming out at about 150, 160 exahash. That's 25%. I'm not even including all the miners. I'm only including, most of them. Yes, I'm including the bigger ones, so the Marathons and the Riots and the CleanSparks, in terms of hash rate, and BitFarms and IREN. They're the bigger miners. But there's still a lot of miners that I'm not including. So I would suggest that 25% that I've got in my analysis is probably closer to 35-40% of the world's hash rate. These miners have got the latest machines, or a majority have got the latest machines. So they're looking at, the S21, T21 miners going into place now. So, and also the size of these companies, we're talking about, just highlighting the previous chart, there's 12 or 13 of these miners now that are into sort of like the $1 billion range. And so that gives them, the opportunity to maybe negotiate better power deals with the providers, because they're going to be using a lot of power, and economies of scale suggest that they'll get great deals. And we know from the updates that they bring us each month, TeraWulf, IREN, SATO even put their Bitcoin cost to mine in terms of energy on their monthly updates. And every quarter, we know exactly what every miner is spending on energy, then, because that's, the quarterly reports have to be, audited and have to be, have a level of accuracy in there. So these miners have got really good deals. So we've talked about Cipher, 2.7 cents a kilowatt hour. We've talked about TeraWulf, about 3.5 cents. The majority of the miners are probably around the 4 to 4.5 cents. Some of the hosted miners, so we know that Bit Digital and Marathon, even though they've bought some sites, still predominantly a hosted miner. About 45% of infrastructure at the moment, so that suggests 55% is still hosted. And when we saw the last update on their hosting cost plus energy, that was around the 6.5 cents a kilowatt hour. Now, bear in mind, these miners have got the best deals. You want to make sure you've got the best deals, because at that sort of like hash price there, it starts becoming a challenge at the current point in time. Now, as the Bitcoin price rises, you will get, the hash rate will increase to a certain extent. More miners will come online that were unprofitable at this point in time. So miners switched off when it got down to 43, not necessarily the North American miners, but global miners that were not able to achieve that sort of level of energy cost, or have the most efficient mining machines that these North American miners have got, would have had to switch off. We saw the global hash rate drop to under 500 at one point. but we've seen it go back to 600. And this last sort of 6 months or so, it's been around 550, 600 throughout that period. So, this is something to bear in mind as we move forward. The correlation between hash price, i.e. the Bitcoin price, and making sure that you've got the cheapest cost available when you're mining Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear, Anthony, that segment of miners that we cover is representative of about 25% of global hash rate, just with the 15 or so miners. But totally get your point on energy and the importance of energy pricing, with hash price flirting with these lows. But nice to see it moving in the right direction. At least.
Just to add to that, Bryce, that's current hash rate. If you start looking at what these miners are expected to achieve by the end of the year, right, that hash rate figure looks significantly higher. You've got some of these miners are going to grow at least 10, 12 in terms of Mara, 20 exahash between now and the end of the year. So that percentage just for the 16 that I, or 15 or 16 that I look at, is going to be significantly higher than 25%.
Sure. Yeah, makes sense. Now, we're a week out from Bitcoin 2024, held in Nashville. Trump is back on the speaking agenda here. He has confirmed he's going to be speaking. We also have RFK Jr., a number of huge names, Cathie Wood, and Edward Snowden, which I didn't even think was allowed in your country, DR. Is he allowed back now?
You do it by video
conference. There you go.
That's it.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
He did it so he was on the Amsterdam conference last year where I was a speaker, and he did a video link. So that I would imagine if he's not allowed back in the country, which I don't think he is, he's on there. But you've also got, next to Edward Snowden there, you've got another, the previous husband of Katy Perry. So that's Russell Brand. So he's a sort of, I don't know what you want to call him at the moment. He's a social media influencer, but he's got a history of TV presenter, and been in a few films and stuff like that. So and
Michael Saylor. So it should be a stacked house, and you and I will be up on the stage, Anthony. So that'll be great as well. We're both holding a panel there on the Thursday and the Friday.
Yep.
And last slide here before we get into the company specific metrics, you guys. We've got our podcast up and well now, almost 4,000 downloads. We've just been uploading each and every YouTube video on there. So 4 new episodes this week. Again, great if you're driving or at the gym. This was a slide I wanted to get your take on, DR, before we get into the company specific ones. And we're actually getting quite a few questions about Hive. So we'll probably start off this week with Hive, just as a heads up to Anthony and DR there. But DR, we put together a video this week talking about really the main widespread adoption of Bitcoin, the mainstream mentality we're starting to see, the 180 that we've seen China take, Larry Fink, BlackRock, a lot of these big institutional finance giants around the world have really taken a second look at Bitcoin and are coming out and saying, hey, my first impression here was not correct. There is something inherently valuable about Bitcoin. Not to mention, Trump has also now been appointed as the official candidate at the Republican National Convention and appointed a VP who's holding over $250,000 of Bitcoin. So a tremendous amount of news, a tremendous amount of bullish sentiment towards Bitcoin. What is your take on these headlines from the last, I'd say, 10, 15 days here?
Well, I think you pretty much covered all the highlights. We haven't had this much of a flurry of positive Bitcoin news since I can remember. And I'm not the oldest hat in the sector, but I've been following it pretty good now for about 4 or 5 years. And this has never really had this much consistently positive news as we've had in the last few weeks. From the Republican Party, Trump and his presidential vice president candidate Vance, we have seen very pro-Bitcoin stances, both in practice and what Vance has disclosed, and what Trump has espoused, meeting with miners at Mar-a-Lago, speaking at Bitcoin Nashville. The Republican National Convention has actually put out talking points on their platform, very pro-Bitcoin about what they like to do. I'm always a little bit leery in America about what campaign promises and what they actually mean to in reality. But right now, as far as it goes, the candidates are certainly taking a very pro-Bitcoin stance. It's made them very popular in the Bitcoin community, and I hope that by making it an election issue, well, for one, the fact that it is an election issue is remarkable. And for two, I hope that does lead to substance. Sometimes campaign promises, they get forgotten after November. That said, I was very interested to hear what Larry Fink and BlackRock said yesterday. I thought a very candid piece on with Jim Cramer and MSNBC that 5 years ago, he was a proud skeptic, and he owns that. But like any really intelligent man will do or woman will do as an investment cycle, you have to reevaluate. And looking at a lens now, the current situation, he sees use cases, he sees value, he sees his digital gold. Those sound bites really showed to me a matter of BlackRock is on board, Fidelity's on board, big companies are on board. And with that kind of tailwind and a second wave of ETFs coming through the banks this fall, we're going to see more and more positive traction in the sector politically, through hedge funds, through institutions, through banks, and China. You mentioned that as well, Bryce. It's really great to see the overall flurry of news. We haven't had this many tailwinds in the sector as long as I've been covering it, which is why I'm overall just so bullish about the next 6 to 12 months. Failing any black swan events, feels like we're on a great track.
It's interesting you mentioned, that Larry Fink, his 5 years his opinion has changed. I mean, BlackRock have something like $18 billion worth of Bitcoin in their investments now. So they hold more Bitcoin than MicroStrategy at the moment. So, and also you've got next week, it looks like, I think the 23rd, the beginning of next week, the ETF, Ethereum ETFs will get approved. And so we'll start seeing trading on the ETFs probably from the 23rd of July onwards. That's my birthday next week. So that'll be an interesting day to keep an eye on. China coming back into the fold. That's obviously big news because, we saw what happened to the hash rate when China put the ban in place back in May 2021. There was literally 56% of the hash rate just came off straight away, which meant that at the next difficulty change, a lot of these miners that we look at now started to see their production massively increase because, they were able to sort of like have a bigger proportion of the global hash rate. The only person we need to see now on that sheet there is turning into a positive Bitcoin is Peter Schiff. Maybe if we get him on there with like saying I've changed my mind, I think everything's open then for a sound Bitcoin rise. But
there we go.
Yeah.
Anthony, it's your 35th birthday coming up, isn't it?
35th, absolutely.
Yeah, right on, buddy. I'll be looking forward to celebrating with you in Nashville. Yeah, DR, it's great to get your take on this. Obviously, we cover a lot of U.S. politics, but Anthony and I don't live in the U.S. We're not American, so it's nice to see. You're right about campaign promises. Unfortunately, I think that is a commonality between our three countries. But at the very least, it's nice to see the bullish sentiment, and it is great for Bitcoin adoption. Just through an educational stance, whether or not new policies come out or whatever the case. Now, moving into the company-specific questions and miners here, you guys, Hive Digital. So we've been receiving a lot of questions about them. Anthony, you've talked about them extensively on our podcast here. They've been one that's been relatively muted compared to the other miners over the last few months. So you'll notice the format today, you guys. Each miner slide, we've got this excerpt pulled from StockTwits, basically showing the last 3 months of stock performance to really compare and contrast here. So with Hive, you'll notice some of the other miners are up 100, 200%. Hive's up 52% in the last 3 months, which is phenomenal in any regular investment situation. But compared to their peers, actually a little bit muted. So maybe DR, we'll start off with you. What is your take on Hive right now? Do you think they may be poised for a big catch-up trade here?
I do think they're undervalued. When they run, timing is always a tough thing, but having had the pleasure on our platform with Adrian to talk to Aiden Silic last week, I really am excited about all the different things they have in the queue. Yes, they are expanding Bitcoin exahash, I believe, to 8 by end of year. But really, Hive Cloud is where the interest is growing right now. Much like Anthony mentioned earlier, after the Core Scientific deal really put the spotlight on it, all these HPC companies, they've got a lot of interest. Hive Cloud did 1.8 million last quarter. That might only be a 7 million annualized run rate, but they are actually producing and they have a lot of growth plans in the queue. I think it's only a matter of time before the market starts to realize that these revenues aren't aspirational. They're beginning to come in and they will grow. He was out at Freedom Fest in Las Vegas when he talked to us, and the amount of interest in inbounds he's getting on the Hive Cloud and HPC services side alone more than justifies a $4 price for me. I was very bullish about the future growth plans. I do think it's been muted so far. I'm not quite sure why. The one knock I've had on Hive is perhaps they haven't had enough growth. They haven't really put out a big projection yet. They're very profitable. Their costs are great. Anthony, you did a great job with their metrics showing just how undervalued they were about a month or so ago. So I'll defer to you on that, but it's just the size, their scope. They're a small company. There's nothing wrong with being a small company who operates well and makes money. And the big growth on the HPC side, I think, is inbound.
Absolutely. If you look at that chart there and go to the 6th of June, that's where you can see the start of the rise there. So that was the week that the CoreWeave was announced there. So Hive have been in the sort of like the HPC space longer than pretty much all the miners, because they had these GPUs to mine Ethereum back in the day, and you know, they took the gamble. It paid off for them for Ethereum mining. I mean, those margins were in the 90% mining Ethereum mining compared to where Bitcoin was, which is significantly lower. So them and Huck were getting the real benefit of mining Ethereum, and they kept buying machines literally up until the time that the fork occurred back in September 2022. And so then it's like a case of, well, what's the next plan? They started using those GPUs to mine additional altcoins, and the revenues were just nowhere near. I think they were achieving something like 5% of the revenues they were achieving through Ethereum the previous month. So they had to look at another plan, and you know, they started announcing, you know, they're going to move into the HPC space. So way before Sam Tabar and Bit Digital or IREN or any of the other players, Hut 8 themselves, they did move into the HPC because they bought a HPC number of data. They bought 5 data centers. They were thinking ahead of the game. But you're quite right, DR. In terms of Hive, low cost, but what they haven't really done is they haven't probably utilized the opportunity to raise money through an ATM to grow the company quick, like some of these others have done. And you know, we've been critical of companies using ATMs, but you know, when it's used right, it can be absolutely, you know, really good. I mean, look at the likes of CleanSpark and IREN, probably two of the standout companies in the last 12 months who've basically gone through and utilized their ATMs to grow hash rate. I mean, you go back 2 years ago, and some of these companies were in like low single-digit hash rates and looking to maybe, you know, get to 3 or 4 by the end of the year. The companies now are looking to get to 30, 40, 50 exahash by the end of this year. And we're talking about Hive growing to 8. Hive in 2021 were as big, if not bigger, than all these other companies. Seriously, they were a big, big company. In 2021, nobody earned as much revenue as Hive Digital. No other, Marathon didn't earn as much, Riot didn't earn as much. They were the biggest earners in 2021 and most of 2022. Until that Ethereum stopped, they were earning more than the Bitcoin miners because the revenues were fantastic. And so what we've seen is we've seen them probably, you know, trying to work out the strategy, but it's not happened quick enough for them. And maybe, you know, I really hope that the revenues you've articulated there about this, you know, 7. I thought it was like closer to sort of like 10 million per annualized of annualized revenue per year, with a target of getting to 20 by the end of the year. So, you know, that's 20 by the end of the year. Well, we've just said, you know, Sam Tabar at Bit Digital, he's on 92 million from August. You know, there's a big difference. And if you look at if you go back to that chart with the market capitalizations, Bit Digital, who are really effectively a small miner who've managed to get a really good HPC deal, are now a bigger market capitalization than actual Hive. I think they're over they're 114. Yeah, according to that chart, they're 514 million versus Hive at 487 million. So we can see the gap. We've talked about this gap before. So BitFarms at 1.2 billion, and then there's that $700 million gap between them and the next miner down there. And then once we get past Hive, so Bit Digital and Hive are sort of like playing for this sort of like mid-tier all on their own at the moment. And then you've got a massive drop then down to DMG and Argo, who are around about the 100 million each. So I think some shareholders will be disappointed in that sort of like they've not reached the growth. They do mine Bitcoin really cheap. They do have low SG&A costs. But I think in the current climate where we've seen miners grow exponentially, people were thinking, why haven't Hive looked at that strategy as well? And I suppose hindsight's a great thing. It's great to say now what they should have done, but at the time you take a gamble, and sometimes it pays off, sometimes it doesn't. I mean, look at the amount of miners who went through the debt in 2022 thinking we'll grow exponentially, we'll borrow as much as we can, get these miners, Bitcoin price is going to the moon, and we'll all make loads of money. And what happened? The Bitcoin price dropped, the value of the machines that they bought on debt dropped. They couldn't afford the debt repayments, and even some of the good companies, IREN, couldn't, they stopped paying their debt because they realized that the mining machines were literally half the price of the debt. So they basically said to NIDIC, come and collect them. But I think people are, whether Hive, if they can get to 8 by the end of the year and grow that HPC, that might give them more growth in the share price. But we need to see some updates to sort of reflect that.
Sure. Now, another quick question on Hive. When is our call with Hive? So we were supposed to have Frank on last Monday. We actually did have a call with him, a good visit. He was saying we should have Aiden on as well. So they've asked to rebook, I think within the next week or so here, Anthony. We'll get both of them on the channel. We can talk about some of this growth and forecast or outlook for the company. Now, I wanted to get your take on Cipher next, actually, here, DR. So I'll jump back to that market cap slide for a second. Cipher has just broken into the $2 billion market cap club. So you'll see just shy of Core Scientific there. They had some big moves this week. I think up 28% or something on Monday, and then up double digits as well yesterday. Now, you were talking about the potential sale of Cipher, or at least discussion of that sale, as a main catalyst for the big move we've seen here. So I'll bring up their slide as well, but I'm curious to get your thoughts, not only on Cipher, but on the current speculation or headlines there as well.
Yeah, happy to. This is one of the companies I've been invested in. One of my top 5 positions, somewhere around the 4 or 5 range. I've been following them very closely for a while. Had a chance to talk to management. Feel I got a pretty good grasp on where they're going. Just as an aside, the Cipher is one of the larger HODL companies with over 2,200 Bitcoins in HODL. And the last 3 sessions, not counting today, we've seen these HODL companies, by and large, really have some big gains. Riot, 36%, CleanSpark, 32%, Cipher, 55%, Marathon, 40%, and HUT, 40%. Those are the top 5 HODLs outside of Hive Digital, which we just covered. And so I think a lot of the current price action behind Cipher, and it's had spectacular price action, is due to the pump in Bitcoin and their HODL. I think we've seen some rotation back into those companies in the last few sessions. And also, I just think that it was time for it to play catch up. They got a lot of great growth in the queue. They're going with a vertical integration model, building out Black Pearl and doing miner swaps in Odessa that are really going to increase their hash rate and their megawatt capacity by 2025. They're targeting 588 megawatts by next year. And with the new site they just bought at Cotilla, Texas, they have potential to get up to 788 megawatts. And they have a cheap energy cost at 2.7 cents per kilowatt hour on what they have now. It's interesting to see if they're able to keep that consistent. We haven't seen the pricing on Cotilla. That's obviously way too premature. So I don't know how that's going to project out to the entire potentially 700 plus megawatts. But what we can project out is end of this year, Cipher is going to be at 13.5 exahash at 18.6 joules per terahash efficiency, mostly through miner swaps at Odessa. They're really going to do a great job driving the efficiency under 20 joules, increasing from currently 8 to 13. So a substantive, about 60% gain in exahash. But the big growth comes next year with the Black Pearl site as we get into 2025, where they're targeting 35 exahash and getting down to 15 joules per terahash efficiency, which at that price point, 2.7, 35 exa, and that efficiency is going to be a monster. So for me, I had more of a long-term view so that it can get there when it gets there. This wasn't a flip for me. It was something I was going to hold into next year and let the story play out. We've seen a massive run-up, and then today, really about 9:30 or 10 o'clock, started seeing stuff come across Bloomberg that they're exploring a sale. Exploring a sale is very vague, and I want to be very careful here that we don't know anything. These are a lot of rumors. But what it's looking like is there's an AI firm that has made an offer to acquire Cipher Energy for data center space. Now, as I mentioned, they're going to 588 megawatts at 2.7 cents per kilowatt hour, which makes it an incredible target for a hyperscaler. We saw something very similar play out with CoreWeave after they inked the deal with Core Scientific, actually made an offer to buy out the whole company. Core took a week or two very quickly. I'm not sure exact timeline, but very quickly responded. They weren't interested, moved on. The offer never came to fruition. And CoreWeave didn't then exercise their option to acquire more megawatts to grow out HPC as an agreement not to purchase. But I think that we're looking at these Bitcoin miners as incredible energy arbitrage plays. When I talked to Sue Ennis, she made the comment that they're energy-based REITs, that megawatts are undervalued, and these hyperscalers are looking to get their hands on whatever megawatts they can. I don't believe that the interest, and what we know is Cipher internally said that they're looking at the options. They have received takeover interest. They're weighing the valuation. I don't think it's another Bitcoin miner. And that's just my speculation purely. I think this is an AI company looking at the megawatts.
Gotcha.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing for Cipher? Way too premature to tell. You can't evaluate a deal without any of the terms. So everyone on my timeline today on X is like, is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Should I sell my stock? It could be a great offer, in which case the board of directors has an obligation to look at shareholder value. And the largest owner in the room, as Anthony pointed out to me earlier, and I hadn't even clicked to me, is Bitfury. They hold a large concentration of shares. So there's a lot of interplay here as far as any potential sales that doesn't necessarily start and end with the CEO of the company, which is an interesting dynamic. But I'm a big fan of Cipher Energy. I've been invested in them for a while. I like the leadership. I like the direction. I think they have low cost power, efficiency, and vertical integration, things I look for. This buyout is definitely something to keep our eyes on. A lot of rumors. Again, it could be a situation like CoreWeave where it doesn't come to fruition, or maybe there's legs to this. But this is something new that I think is kind of really starting to put, if Core didn't already in the CoreWeave deal, if we see more hyperscalers making offers or AI companies making offers to Bitcoin miners, it is going to absolutely put a floor under all of these plays we're talking about.
Yeah, it's really exciting for me. It seems we've got the best of both worlds right now with the HPC megawatt floor price set, and then the upside potential of Bitcoin with the pending bull run takeoff here. Anthony, I'm curious to get your thoughts on Cipher, and then we're getting a few questions on TeraWulf, so I want to shift gears to them next. But I know Cipher is one you've held in the past, Anthony. They're up 91% over the last 3 months. What's your take here?
Yeah, I mean, we know they've got the one of the lowest energy costs with a 2.7 price agreement for the next few years. So that's a great energy price there. What again with this increased hash rate, a lot of these miners now, when they're replacing S19s with S21 Pros, you're effectively not having to build extra accommodation because the power of these new miners effectively twice as powerful and more efficient than the ones they're replacing. So actually, from a space perspective, you don't need to build extra space to literally double your hash rate. And that's why we're seeing some of these miners now quote significant jumps this year without actually having finished any of their facilities. So they can just like replace. IREN are doing the same at the Childress site there. They're gonna gain 4 exahash by just replacing miners. In terms of improved hash rate, more powerful miners, more efficient miners. So that's great for two things. One, it's getting them close to the target, but actually it's reducing the cost to mine a Bitcoin because these latest miners now at 15 joules a terahash, and we know the next tranche of miners coming through are going to be even more efficient, makes them cost to mine a Bitcoin really, really low. At the moment, we've got, I think, CleanSpark around about the 22 in terms of joules per terahash. That's about the lowest, but there's quite a few companies in that sort of 24 range now. And by the end of the year, just like DR articulated about Cipher, there'll be a lot of these mining companies will be, 20 or sub 20 in terms of efficiency because of all the new miners they're going to be receiving over the next 6 months.
Anthony, that's a really interesting long-term kind of secular tailwind here. We think about Bitcoin, and one of the big, negative sides of the Bitcoin mining sector is you've got these halving epochs every 4 years that are going to compress revenue. But you're right in saying, Anthony, on the technology or hardware side, these machines are continuing to get smaller, more efficient, cheaper to operate in terms of an energy profile or consumption. And that's a trend we would continue or expect to continue to see for years and years to come. Is that correct in saying, Anthony, now that we're starting to see even 5 and 10 joules per terahash in terms of new miner specs?
Yeah, we're certainly getting down to the low double digits. So we've seen, 12 being announced by Bitmain. We've seen BitDeer go even better than that. I mean, they believe they can get to 10. They've even got a target to get to 5, but it's a target that requires a lot more work and thought to go into that. But they're setting themselves targets. And, as we talk about infrastructure, make sure you include BitDeer in that infrastructure discussion, because they're at something like 2.5 gigawatts of power in terms of what they've got managed at the moment and what they've got, what they're growing to with all these new sites under development. So you look at market capitalization for doing it from a power and infrastructure side of things. There's a company that you need to do a little bit more research. Their self-mining is like, is just a fraction of the business, really, 40% of the business. And once they start delivering ASICs to their facilities, that will then sort of like reduce the self-mining. The self-mining needs to keep up with that 40% share of the business. So BitDeer is one I sort of like pay more attention to as we get more announcements from them there. But
we'll come on to BitDeer next, Anthony. I'll bring them up right after TeraWulf, and we can start talking about them in more detail here. Now, TeraWulf, you guys, this is one of my top 3 holds. I've been a Wolfpack member for quite some time. I actually think I got a few shares in the 84-cent range, so I was pretty happy about that, reviewing some trades there last night. But TeraWulf's been on a big run, north of $6. I know the market's pulled back quite a bit this morning since we started filming, but regardless, big run here, up around 240% in the last 3 months. So this is one of the top performers, if not the top performer out of the pack right now. DR, what is your stance on TeraWulf? I know you're pretty bullish on this company. Obviously excited about the meeting tomorrow with, it sounds like, the full Wolf pack on the channel. Yeah. So that'd be great. What's your thoughts on Wolf?
I'm with you, Bryce. I'm a huge Wolfpack guy. They're one of my top 3 also. I'm excited tomorrow. I got some time with the VP of Operations, Sean Farrell, and it looks like Kerry Langlis and Patrick Fleury will also be joining us. We're going to wait kind of up until the moment as they are traveling, but back to the actual stocks at hand, they've had a great run lately. I love where they're positioned, especially the Lake Mariner site, Nautilus as well, but mostly the growth we're seeing in Lake Mariner, not just as far as exahash growth, but the HPC optionality they've been very clear on. They did a 2-megawatt test pilot called the Wolf Den that has really gone super well for them. And I'm going to dive more into this tomorrow, but what they had in their fireside chat with Cantor Fitzgerald disclosed was they're going to have 2 buildings, a 20 megawatt and a 50 megawatt, probably under contract by the end of this year. And they're being very, very optimistic about the price point they're able to get. Looking at 15-year options, 5 years fully funded up front, which will provide the CapEx, the upfront build-out cost, and then the rate after that to be competitive with what we saw with Core Scientific. I'll drill more on that tomorrow, but the fact that they're going to have their first 20 megawatt building done this year and a 50 megawatt building done next year, and expect to have them under contract soon, as well as to grow over 30 exahash by 2025. They have a great locked-in power rate with hydro, clean power, great for fiber optics, great geographic location for the HPC in the Northeast. I love what they have over at Nautilus site with the joint venture they had with Talon, still producing a couple exahashes over there. They did increase their megawatts recently and took advantage of the option they had to grow that site. And for what they can get out of it, which I believe is only 100 megawatts, it's at 2.0 cents per kilowatt hour. It's a great rate. Wolf has really done a great job, I think, at being stewards of shareholder value, maybe almost to their detriment. By that, I mean, they have not used an ATM on the books very aggressively at all. They have chosen to grow a very strong business by selling all they mine, turning their Bitcoin not into HODL, but back into paying off debt, into funding further growth, protecting shareholder value, protecting the overall share count. I believe the first time, and I could be wrong, but I believe the first time they've tapped this new ATM that they've had on the books was to pay off the last portion of their debt, which is a combination of free cash flow and equity offerings about 2 weeks ago. Again, something I'm going to dive into more with Patrick tomorrow, because he certainly would be the guy to ask about that. But they're debt free. They have large growth in place. They have a great facility in Lake Mariner, who I think I'd put up against about anybody from A to Z as far as what they can do, not only as far as Bitcoin, but in high performance computing. I really like the leadership team there. I think they've been straight shooters. My one knock against them is maybe they should have been a little more aggressive early into the bear market. But, you know, hindsight being 2020, it's easy to say. I think they built a great business. And although it pulled back some today, it did set a new 52-week high at 650 today, early on. And that's the third day in a row it's done that. We're just entering price discovery, and I don't think this stays in the $6 range very much longer.
Hey, DR, I want to come back to you and talk about the HOPA Port Authority news in relation to Lake Mariner as well. But before we do, Anthony, can you just talk about the Beowulf connection here and Paul Prager's role in that company? Why is this important, and what does it mean for TeraWulf?
Well, he controls a power company as well, so you know they've got you know both sides of it. They are effectively a fully integrated Bitcoin miner, you know, with power all the way to delivering Bitcoin. So you know he's never had an issue. I mean, I agree with DR. You know, the likelihood is they use the ATM to pay the debt off there, because you know we were told they were going to use some profits. And if you think about the since the halving, the Bitcoin price hasn't been delivering sufficient hash price for companies to make significant profits that they were making pre-halving. So you know, but believe you me, when they bring out their next quarterly return, you'll see the number of shares on that quarterly return that they've utilized for ATMs in the previous sort of 3 or 4 months. You know, but the thing is, the market likes being debt free. So you know, other miners have used ATM in terms of growing hash rate, but I think the market liked the fact that TeraWulf made that announcement, and they saw it as a positive stance. Everything they do is good. I like the management team. Well, I've met the management team. I've been on a panel at Amsterdam with Nazar Khan. I've the rest of the team in London. So I'm looking forward to meeting them in Nashville as well. They'll be down in Nashville. And so you know, they run a solid business, and they've definitely moved into that sort of that 2 billion mark very, very quickly. I mean, again, you don't have to go back many months. And TeraWulf was actually lower market capitalization than Hive. This is how quick this company's grown. I mean, I bought, I've just looked now, I was buying Wolf shares last year at 54 cents, a number of trades last year. So you can see how much the market capitalization has increased just in the space of 12 months. And bear in mind, the number of shares in place at that time compared to where they are now is in a different world, because they have raised funds through the ATM to grow their hash rate to where they are at the moment, which is about 8.8, growing to 10. I mean, I'm expecting to hear an announcement imminently that they've achieved 10, because it was supposed to be achieved at the end of June. Right. Like you say, they're on track to get to, I think, 13 and change by the end of the year. You know, and this HPC target that they've got now really, it sounds great, and it's at the right time. I mean, you know, that again, you can see from the 6th of June there on that track there, it was like, you know, hovering around $2, gets to $6.50 in the last sort of like, you know, not even 6 weeks. That's an amazing climb, and that's why they are, in terms of the rises since that CoreWeave announcement, they've risen more than any miner. Yeah, really phenomenal growth. Now, Fuelman, thanks for bringing this up. So Paul also owns the Cayuga Power Station and Somerset plant. Yep. Now, the Somerset plant is the property or location in question with the HOPA Port Authority. So my understanding of this, DR, is this is an 1,800 acre
location. It's got waterfront access, and they basically want to establish a short sea shipping route between Canada and the United States across this lake. And they think, they being the Hopa Port Authority, think that this Somerset location, which also is where the Lake Mariner data center and Bitcoin mine is located, would be a perfect fit for one side of that shipping route. So what's your take on this? And do you think this is just another example of megawatts being so valuable these days?
100%, Bryce, and you pretty much already hit the high points in what we know. It's an 1,800-acre site in Somerset, which of course has ties to TeraWulf right at their doorstep. And for those of you guys who don't know, HOPA is the Hamilton Oshawa Port Authority, because we're not all from up north. And so this Port Authority regulations has reached an agreement basically at this point. There's still some legwork to be done, but they want to establish the shipping lane in this corridor. And it's going to be a major benefit to TeraWulf and to just the area in general. The residents, you know, it's always a touchy thing in my experience, and this is just way out in the weeds, but I sit on a planning and zoning commission here in the city my law firm is in. And it's always interesting when these things come up that the biggest complaints sometimes come from residents. They come from the locals as far as traffic capacity, what we're looking at here. But it doesn't seem that's going to be a problem here. The residents, by and large, are in favor of the economic boon. This could bring up to 100 full-time jobs. And so it's always great to get community buy-in.
Gotcha. Now, interestingly enough, we talked to Jason last about there being no more Corsicanas, right? There's just not access to power at large scale anymore in the United States or in the US, North America. You got to think, DR, if power is already that exclusive and rare, how much value is there with power, 1,800 acres and waterfront access, right? These sites are just
unbelievable,
incredibly desirable for a number of different industries. So I appreciate your thoughts on that one. Anthony, any comments on the port press release there?
No. I think you've covered that between you. I'm nothing really more to add. You know, it's great. It just seems that with every news story this year that TeraWulf are bringing out, it's just adding more and more interest to the stock. You've got the Wolfpack there, you know, firmly got their sights on achieving Mara Pig status. So I'm sure at the end of the day we'll see the Wolves win this battle.
There we go. Hey, well, we'll move over to Bit Digital then, Anthony, and I'll get your take on this one because I know this is a story that you've covered extensively with our podcast and our work here. Another impressive move over the last 3 months, you guys, 130%. And Sam has actually expressed frustration saying the market isn't pricing in the company properly, even talking about the potential spinoff of the digital assets versus the HPC. However, again, you guys, 130% return in 3 months is absolutely phenomenal by any other portfolio or ETF standard. What's your take on Bit Digital right now, Anthony, and current share price?
Yeah, I like Bit Digital. I've been with Bit Digital for a while. Got shares in my portfolio. I agree with Sam, to be honest with you. I think from a valuation perspective, you've got to look at what this company's actually got. I mean, they have a self-mining, you know, just under 3 exahash at the moment, growing to 6 by the end of the year. But for me, the announcement for the HPC deal back in November last year, when they started looking at this, it was 35 million, which went to 50 million in August. Now it goes to 92 million of annualized revenue coming through. So that's a great deal. We know the margins in the first quarter were at 62%. They could have been 71%, but there was a couple of teething issues in the first quarter where they had to repay some of the revenue back to the client. But those problems have been sorted out. That won't be happening again. And so, you know, you're going to have $7 or $8 million of monthly revenue coming from AI, which is really, really profitable revenue. And, you know, that gives the company then an opportunity to grow hash rate as well, because, you know, Sam's quite clear, you know, there's still a Bitcoin miner. they've got into the HPC space, you know, and the first one to have a big client. Yes, we've seen, you know, Core Scientific got a big client now, and we'll probably see other announcements as the landscape starts to change. But BitDigital were the first ones to come in a big client, and it's still a big client. You know, a big client that's, you know, going to pay them, you know, a lot more revenues now as they grow that. They're literally doubling their sort of size of the GPUs for that contract. Sam's articulated that, you know, he wasn't able to achieve, you know, the sort of like the linear increase in terms of growth versus revenue. And we'll probably see that in other contracts now, because you'll start seeing where a floor is in place now for companies coming in there. So, you know, when we look at the CoreWeave deal, that's significant. And people are saying, will we see any deals like that again? Well, time will tell, because, you know, there's an expectation now that, you know, other operators will come in and start trying to sort of say, well, we can do it for this price. But BitDigital, I like them. One thing again, if you look at their monthly update, they did something really clever in June. They swapped a load of Bitcoin for Ethereum, because they've got their sights on using that Ethereum, which they have done over the last year or so now. Is they've been staking the Ethereum, getting really good revenues, and we're talking about, you know, over $100,000 a month in revenues just for staking your Ethereum. So at the end of May, they had about 20,000 Ethereum, and now at the end of June, they've got close to 30,000 Ethereum. So they did sell a big chunk of their Bitcoin, but instead of using that, you know, for capital growth, they bought Ethereum, and lo and behold, next week we've already said the spot Ethereum ETF is going to be approved, and trading will start on the 23rd of July. So the expectation is that, you know, annualized input into Ethereum spot ETFs could be as high as 18 billion over the next 12 months. So, you know, we've seen what's the likes in the first 6 months of the spot Bitcoin spot ETFs, and if you think about Larry Fink and BlackRock, they've purchased 18 billion of Bitcoin alone, and there's 11 ETFs. That's just one ETF have purchased 11 billion of 18 billion of Bitcoin in the first 6 months. When else, you know, people are estimating that the Ethereum market could be a total of 18 billion over the next 12 months. So it could be a well-timed decision by Sam. They're all about margins, so they don't do things without thinking about what the margin will bring in. It's like, you know, they've leased their machines, their GPUs, they've leased the facilities, they've got an engine, and you know that, you know, they're a hosted miner, so they don't have any of their own facilities for hosting. So they look at the margins, and they bring margins in. Their balance sheet for the size of the company is second to none. You know, they've got zero debt, and I mean zero debt. Go through their balance sheet. There's nothing on there that they owe. It's really good. Their enterprise value is really low as well. So you're looking at the market capitalization of 500 million. Their enterprise value is 300 million, because you're going to take off their cash, and you're going to take off their Ethereum and Bitcoin holdings, which together at the moment are around about 200 million. So they've got an enterprise value of 300 million, and they're delivering nearly 3 exahash plus this business that brings in 92 million a year in terms of at a margin that's going to be between 60 and 70%.
And Anthony, like you say, a lot of that balance sheet is held in Ethereum. Their flywheel strategy, the BitDigital Ethereum flywheel strategy, not only are they earning monthly yield, but the value of the Ethereum has gone up tremendously as well. And the yield is based on that value. Now, I did a video on IntChain's group, ICG, this morning, and they actually really stress in their investment deck that they're converting all of their cash on balance sheet to Ethereum. So DR, I want to get your thoughts on this. Sam has made a number of comments really wanting to become the Michael Saylor or the MicroStrategy of Ethereum. What is your thought on this strategy? And do you think this could be a successful, marketing strategy for BitDigital?
I do. And I really think that having more ETH on their balance sheet than any other NASDAQ company differentiates them. This is a huge, huge platform, right? We're talking smart contracts and applications that have function. And unlike the ETFs, as Anthony mentioned, BitDigital can stake their Ethereum. Almost 30,000 of them, which are actually revenue accretive. they're making millions of dollars every quarter and funneling that right back into their HPC and Bitcoin business. No debt, fat margins. And to be able to have this flywheel, which I think a great job has been covered by Sam, by my partner, Adrian Morris, has some great takes on it in our discussion with Sam. And one thing I'll point out about Bit Digital to Anthony, I think you did just a phenomenal job laying out everything. I'm about to smash by some more, thinking about how undervalued this company probably is. It's $300 million enterprise value when they have 92 million of an annualized revenue stream coming in starting in August. That's in about 2 weeks. Not to mention their Bitcoin and their, Ethereum staking. This is a monster. And the margins are great. And I'm just going to add a couple more things you didn't cover. They're not done at 92. They put out a goal of 100 million per annual year, which they're not quite at. They're 92% at. They're hiring a sales director. They're looking at potentially acquiring a data center, vertically integrating on the HPC side because of the predictable nature of the business. They have what Sam calls a pregnant pipeline. They have a lot more clients in the loop. They're not hiring a sales director looking to acquire facilities to stop at 92 million. At this enterprise value, at this market cap, I just don't see how I'm not buying more. In fact, I did buy more Bit Digital yesterday. I chased up my average at 421 just because I just don't see this being anywhere worth what it is now. Yeah. This has got a lot of room to run. I love how leadership is positioning themselves to differentiate in the Ethereum world. The ETF is going to drive a crazy amount of value into the commodity, a crazy amount of interest into the sector. The price of the 30,000 Ethereum they hold will go up from a spot POV, which great for their market cap, but it's going to differentiate them in fact that they stake it, and ETFs by regulation can. They also have done some good work. The last thing I'll mention, I don't think Anthony would bring up unless I missed it. They're doing all the little things with Dell and the partnership program to be an authorized service provider, to be in-house and really vertically integrate their offerings on the HPC side. I think that they're doing all the right things. I wouldn't be surprised. And Sam always talks about, the triple penetration, the 3 legs of the business. They have a target of 6 exahash for the Bitcoin. I wouldn't be surprised that if value dictates that money goes into HPC, they funnel it there and don't worry about growing their exahash very much more. I don't know that 6 is something that, and this is my speculation, they're hard and fast on needing to do. I think he's going to pull the lever that makes the most money.
Felt, DR, when he was on our last discussion, we asked about the 6 exahash, and it really felt to me like that was up for debate based on HPC direction. And that's not confirmed, but he basically said, hey, I'm going to do whatever's best for the company at the time, right?
As he should. Make the most money for the company. That's the business.
Exactly. Hey, now we want to talk CleanSpark next, you guys. But before we do, we just got a quick shout out to Griffin here. So I wanted to bring them up, Anthony. This is one of the smaller miners that we talk about on the channel. We've got a chart for them as well. And unlike most of the miners we've seen here over the past 3 months, we're seeing red on Griffin. So you just talk about undervalued stocks in the space, DR. Griffin, in terms of share price performance, definitely seems to be lagging the group. So Anthony, maybe we'll kick off with you, get your take on what's been going on at Griffin Digital, and Rob's. He originally said 10 exahash goal. This is another situation, as we just talked about, where I don't know if that's a hard and fast target or a firm target. He then said 6 might be more reasonable, but we're over halfway through the year now, Anthony, and haven't really seen a lot of developments towards that goal. What's your take here?
Yeah, I mean, hash rate at the moment just under 1 exahash. They're doing what they're mining each month is in terms of the size of the hash rate is comparable with some of the top producing or the top performing miners. When we talk top performing miners, we're usually talking about the likes of BitFarms and Hive Digital and IREN. But Griffin can certainly, and looking at the June position, certainly punch their weight in size of that. But obviously they're in terms of producing Bitcoin, they're still quite a small miner. Rob had a very sort of a high target to get to by the end of the year. and he wasn't even sure he would make that. But what he has said, and again he's reiterated it in June, they've had significant number of inquiries. I think something like 20 inquiries, which they're actually doing due diligence on at the moment. So a lot of these smaller miners, the only way they're going to really grow is by effectively merging together, or becoming part of a bigger entity. Because the challenge now is when you're at 100 million and you can see the likes of Hive and Bit Digital above you at 500 million, they can see the likes of BitFarms at 1.2 billion. It's a challenge to get that far, and you can have as many ATMs in place at a time, but you just can't grow that level that quickly. It's all about timing, and so they'll be looking at some sort of like moves to maybe acquire some maybe non-public miners, or give the opportunity for some of these bigger non-public miners to come into the market and join with a public miner. Because becoming a public miner is no cheap ticket. You can spend upwards $9-10 million to go public and appear on the Nasdaq. So there's a lot of cost involved in getting to going through that process. And so Griffin themselves, it took about 2 years. They acquired sort of one of these cannabis companies that was like no longer operating in that form, but they were able to purchase the company, get rid of the assets, and basically rename the company. But it was one way of doing it, but it took a long time. I mean, I've known Rob for a couple of years now, and he was constantly trying to get me to include Griffin in my analysis, and say, look, I look at the public miners. I'm not really doing much on the non-public miners at the moment, but as soon as you go public, we'll start to include you. And hey ho, lo and behold, we started to include them from the month they went public. So, Rob's got a very solid background. He was the CFO at Riot Platforms. There's only three directors in the company, or three directors, and that equals 3 members of staff for Griffin at the moment. So all 3 of them have got experience of working in some of these big miners. I know, I think it was Sim was with Marathon Digital. And so they bring this experience to the table, the 3 of them there. They're keeping the cost down. They're a hosted company, so they'll have their miners hosted it by another provider. That keeps down any cost there. So they do things, from that certain perspective really well. The issue is it's the size of the company. As all these other companies are growing exponentially, we haven't seen any increase in the hash rate at the moment for Griffin. But I'm optimistic in the likes that we might hear some news coming through about potential M&A activity, because if you've got 20 deals on the table that you're doing, spending time to go and visit sites, do due diligence, and then come up with a short list of things that you'd like to take forward, why mention that in a monthly update if you're not actually physically doing some of that work? And when we spoke to him on our podcast, he was saying the same thing. He says his phone's not stopped ringing, and I think we won't get to see 10 by the end of the year, but maybe if they can start looking at merging with some of these other small miners or some of the non-public miners, we might see some growth that way. And it gives both entities then the opportunity, like we've seen with the likes of Hut 8 Corp and US BTC. There was 2 companies there that were literally unable to carry on in their own rights from a separate entity. So Hut had loads of money on the balance sheet in terms of Bitcoin, and USBTC had loads of infrastructure in the US but no cash. So by joining together, they were able to meet each other's requirements. And look at what we're seeing now with the Hut share price in the recent weeks. It's now over $20 today. And getting, if you look at where it was in January, the share price just over $6, where it is today, Ash has come in there now, starting to use his strategy, talks about, tell me where I'm going to be in Q3. Maybe we can see something like that happen with Griffin, and see if they can evolve from that there. So that's my take. I don't know what you think, DR. Oh, one thing I'd like to say is, final thing is, today there was an announcement. So at the moment, Griffin and one of the companies that they are providing managed services for, which is Sphere 3D, there's been some legal issues with regards to something that occurred back in 2023, and it looks like now that Sphere aren't going to take that any further. So that part of that litigation now has been removed. So that's a positive news update from Griffin today. That only came out, I think, in the last couple of hours. So that just takes a weight off the mind when you're going through litigation, rightly or wrongly. It means you're having to apply extra resources to deal with that. So looks like that part's been resolved. Not sure everything's been resolved with Sphere 3D yet, but that part certainly has. And I'm sure we'll hear more updates from Rob on that particular issue.
Absolutely. I think that anytime you have Sphere come out and say they're no longer looking to impose any liability, that's great as far as leaving any potential overhang or litigation on the company. You hit everything I would. These guys, Rob and the team, are from Riot and Marathon. They've been in the industry for a long time. They know what they're doing. They're building a profitable company. Actually have an X space with Rob on Friday at noon. I don't usually announce these things. I'm trying to give TeraWulf their moment for tomorrow, but we're doing TeraWulf Thursday, and then we have Griffin on Friday, same at 12 Eastern. So I'm going to be diving into a lot of the topics you just brought up one-on-one with Adrian and Rob Chang on Friday. I think very highly of the company. I'm actually finishing up my research tonight. I think there's a lot of growth potential there. I am curious to hear his thoughts about potentially going up to the NASDAQ and what that would look like. And that's something that I don't know how much he can talk about, but I don't know if that's something that's going to be price prohibitive to the company or what their thoughts are, or as far as is possible. You mentioned with USBTC, there's a lot of consolidation and merger activity in the space that has potential. So I like to pick his brain as much as possible.
Interesting. Yeah, it'll be a good one to listen into. Now, we talk about Griffin being one of the top producers in terms of exahash. Or production per exahash, coming in second in this table, Anthony, only to Hive. On the other end of the spectrum, you just brought up Hut and CleanSpark, which I wanted to talk about next up. So performing lower down in terms of efficiency per exahash, but CleanSpark, a lot of activity in the media here over the last couple of days, couple of weeks, in terms of the grid acquisition in I guess first and foremost, and then a number of small site acquisitions. So we know CleanSpark or CLSK is looking to hit their aggressive exahash growth targets. We know they have contracts on the machines already. They really need to try and find places to plug them in. What's your take on CleanSpark right now, DR?
Yeah. Well, first things first, sorry for misspeaking there. Obviously, Griffin is on the NASDAQ. I wanted to ask him about that whole process. I didn't mean to slight Rob on that whole thing. But with CleanSpark, they have a lot of growth in the queue. The one thing I'm really curious about, and I have not heard a thing on, and they're past their projected timelines on, are the 2 sites in Wyoming. Now, they have a lot of growth that's already outlined. Just acquiring with Grid and their sites in Tennessee, and then, of course, with the option of they bought the 4 sites in Georgia for 70 megawatts. And I know that there's a lot of M&A coming across Zach Bradford's desk. Just swallowing those up and getting the Sandersville site finally complete, hopefully soon, with the transformer that we still are waiting kind of updates on, bringing in the 2 sites in Wyoming, which has some issues with the Center for Foreign Investment in the U.S., and we haven't had any kind of update there. I'd love to be able to understand what the eventual timeline is for Wyoming, but leaving all those things behind as far as what's not clicking on time with Wyoming or Sandersville, the Dalton expansion is going on schedule to add 15 megawatts, and they just acquired sites in Tennessee and Georgia. They have all the S21 Pros on order from Bitmain already funded. They're going to swell up way past their current 20.1 to probably close to 30 by the end of the 3rd quarter, if I don't miss my guess, just on the megawatts they're going to have up quickly in Tennessee and Georgia. The question as far as where they go from there is going to depend on those things I just mentioned. When does Sandersville come on and those 50 megawatts come available? And when is Wyoming going to happen? I'm worried that if that gets too late in the season, that not that they're not going to close, but if it doesn't happen soon, ground freezes quick in Wyoming, and laying infrastructure in before winter, that's going to be prohibitive. This could hit more of a delay than we think. But despite all that, this is a very strong company. They're very clear about the fact that they're Bitcoin miners. They're good at it. That's all they're going to do. And their margins are excellent. They have seemed to have found their rhythm. They have a great cohesive team. They're actively buying with their war chest, a huge hodl. And I like how they structured the deal with equity and not only brought in the sites from Grid, but brought in the personnel. I think that's a stark contrast to some other M&A type activity we're seeing in the space where they're trying to bring in more of a partner. Here's equity in the company. Let's bring in some of these great mining people. Let's bring in these sites and add them onto the team, not more of a takeover, but more of a cohesive approach. I am a huge fan of the company. It is still my top overall by dollar investment in the Bitcoin mining sector. I see no reason to doubt that they will hit their goals and to believe that they'll execute. And the way that they do it, and the way that they are able to expand these communities, provide jobs, provide infrastructure, and uplift, I just think from top to bottom, it's a great story. I don't have too many doubts from a technical standpoint or an execution standpoint that this stock is going to perform and this company is going to perform.
Now, Anthony, I want to get your take here because if you look at the past 3-month performance on CleanSpark, 38%. This is my largest position by dollar value as well, DR. So you and I probably have fairly similar looking portfolios. But Anthony, you put together some information about basically performance of share price since that CoreWeave deal. And you identified that a lot of the pure play miners have really lagged behind the HPC exposed companies. So we'll do a further podcast probably later this week on that analysis. But CleanSpark is one that you identified as one of those pure plays. Do you think the market is going to warm back up to these pure play miners based on these Bitcoin price moves we're seeing?
Well, not at the current Bitcoin price, but if Bitcoin price is to start, getting, into over 100,000, the conversation changes then towards Bitcoin. At the moment, that the HPC news is just dominating the Bitcoin news. We are in that position now where post halving, 70-90 days, we see stock prices, Bitcoin price increasing, and once that happens, the mining, stocks will follow as they have correlated over the last couple of halvings. But yeah, in terms of CleanSpark, since the if you look at where they were when the CoreWeave announcement and look at today's price there, and actually 1979, it's closer to $18.30 at the moment. So it's only a 16% increase in terms of the share price since that CoreWeave announcement. And we just said that TeraWulf is up 200% since the CoreWeave announcement, and Core Scientific's up 130% nearly, and Soluna is up 180%. So some of these HPC, the companies that have took the HPC on as part of their businesses are seeing that real increase there. But let's go back to October last year when CleanSpark was valued at 600 million and look at where they are today at 4 billion. So they had their run effectively towards the end of last year, and if you go back to the first 6 months, there's only, I think, IREN and TeraWulf who can actually compete in terms of year-to-date share price growth. So CleanSpark's still doing okay. I mean, we've seen them grow their hash rate, significantly this year. They've got a big target to get to, just like a number of the other big miners. But you'd expect them to get close to. It's interesting to hear what DR said about some of these facilities. They're having to manage quite a few separate facilities, making sure all the wheels are spinning on those facilities there, and starting to still have to get more and more facilities ready before the end of the year to get that hash rate. Whereas we look at the likes of Riot and IREN, it's one site, it's in front of you. You can see exactly what's happening. You just go and bring in more staff. I mean, we've been fortunate. We've been to the largest Bitcoin mine site in the world back in June at Corsicana, and the sheer size and 550 employees on that site. And we've just talked about Rob and his two other employees in the company with Griffin Mining, and then you've got 550 at Corsicana, and the headquarters for Riot isn't at Corsicana. They've got a Whinstone facility, and the headquarters are in, I think, Vegas at the moment. So It's easier to manage when you've got one location. CleanSpark have got quite a few locations, and they're going to be having to sort of like manage separately all these locations there. But they do have a good team, and they have got a track record. Certainly, this last couple of years, we've seen them grow from effectively a tier 3 to a tier 1 miner quicker than probably anybody's grown. And they still have a big chunk of target. They still got to get literally another 10 exahash by the end of the year, and to get to their target of 32. And so, the same way so now we're looking at Riot and CleanSpark in terms of hash rate are on a sort of like a par now. So who's going to win the race there? If one was to make it, I think Riot will make it. If two will make it, obviously CleanSpark, will do as well. But I expect them to get close. I think the market's anticipating these miners achieving it, and there'll be consequences if they come short, because the market does probably factor in some of these growth targets. I mean, look at the IREN share price when they announced they were going to 30 exahash. I mean, their share price went from mediocrity to sort of like absolutely ridiculous. I mean, when it got to over $15, into the high $15. That rise was a bit like TeraWulf's rise of late. It was a phenomenal rise, and then we've seen it pull back a little bit. Probably helped by that short report we saw recently. But I think that report's been backed out there. CleanSpark being the best efficient miner. They're not the best efficient miner. They're in that sort of group. So in terms of, if you look at like efficiency, just from the fact that have they got the most efficient fleet? Yes, they have. Do they produce the most Bitcoin per miner? No, they don't. They are doing things really well. I mean, the fact that they're literally putting all their production into the HODL, so they've grown that HODL really well to over 6,000 Bitcoin now. So only the likes of Hut, Riot, and Marathon have got more Bitcoin from a public miner. So they've grown that really, really quickly. Probably in the last 12 months, they've grown that, because they were at 400 Bitcoin probably about 12 months ago. So they've been really, not spending any of their production, obviously funding their operational and capital costs via the ATM, and they've made no secret of that. I mean, it was only in March they highlighted another 800 million ATM, which I'm assuming has probably been mostly utilized by now. I mean, these companies are using these ATMs. 2 years ago, I think BitFarms were the first one to announce a $500 million ATM. And, by the end of the 2 years, they hadn't used that much of it. These miners now, IREN have just used nearly 500 million in about 6 weeks. It's just, the sheer, and they can get away with it because look at the volumes of these miners. Look at CleanSpark's, average volume of shares traded on a daily basis. If you look at the 3-month average, it's going to be 30-40 million shares. In fact, on there you've got CleanSpark there, 31 million shares traded a day as an average for the 3 months. Marathon, 48 million nearly. Riot, 24 million. IREN, 15 million shares. I can go back 12 months ago. That was lower than 2 million. So IREN at the moment, this isn't last week. This is a 3-month average volume. Core Scientific, 11 million. You have to, BitFarms, 22 million shares on a daily basis. If you've got an ATM and you're selling a couple of million shares a day, that's not even going to be noticed on those volumes. Not even going to be noticed. And that's why, at the moment now, it's been really fairly easy to raise capital. If you haven't got an ATM and you go to the market and say to the market, we're going to have to raise money by diluting shares, which certain companies had to. So we look at Argo Blockchain, they've had to do it 3 or 4 times. Go to the market, you are selling shares at a 20%, 25% discount, and your share price gets on the day of that dilution, your share price goes down by that factor effectively straight away. These miners that you've highlighted there in that red rectangle, they've been using ATMs like an ATM. Like we use an ATM, just going to it, drawing out cash, and just spending it on the company. And nobody's noticing it. We do notice it when the quarterlies come out, because on the front page of every quarterly update by the SEC, these mining companies have to tell you how many shares are in issue as at the date of the actual filing, not the date of the end of the quarter. So when we see the next quarters come out in August, and we'll see a whole raft of quarter 2 updates coming out in August, starting from, I think, from the 5th of August all the way through to the end of August there. Check the filings, go to the front page, and you'll see in one of the bottom paragraphs how many shares these companies have got outstanding as at the date of that report was issued, not the end of the quarter, which is the 30th of June. Inside the report, it will tell you how many shares they had in issue at the 30th of June. And then you can look at the fact is, well, if that, say 10 million at the 30th of June, and on the front page it says 12 million, they sold 2 million shares, even in the last few weeks. Yeah. And believe you me, that number is really important because people don't always pick up on that number. And so, when you're looking at sort of like at the market offerings, there's a lot of information. Everything's held in these quarterly updates, or the 10K, which is the full year updates there. There's, you'll hear all about the Auradines for, Marathon Digital. All these things are held in those 200-page filings. You're just going to know where to look for it. And people will see 200 pages and think, I'm not reading all that. I'll wait for Anthony to come out and dissect it for me and sort of like, put it into nice, easy paragraphs. But I'm the idiot who reads these 200-page filings and gets all those sort of interesting bits of information.
Anthony, you mentioned ATM use and you mentioned IREN as well. So maybe we'll shift gears over to IREN next. They've had tremendous share price appreciation over the past 3 months. As you can see on screen here, you guys, 189%. Now, yes, these stocks have pulled back a little bit since these screenshots were taken this morning, but nonetheless, IREN up over $12 per share. Now, DR, what's your thoughts? I know you've done quite a bit of work on IREN, discussion with a number of members of their team as well. What are your feelings on this company right now?
I'm very optimistic. This sits right in between CleanSpark and Wolf for me in my number 2 spot. I've been big on IREN, not as long as Anthony, but since about the $4 range, buying down as low as in the mid 3s on a dip. So I've been following this company for a while. I do absolutely love their growth plan and what they got going out in Texas. Pretty achievable targets for me to hit 20 by the 3rd quarter and 30 by the end of the year, based on the fact that they got the miners on order and paid for. They got the site at Childress to plug them in. It just doesn't seem like a lot of variables. Back to what Anthony was saying about all these different sites to manage in Tennessee and Mississippi and Georgia. They got Childress. They got miners on order. The miners are paid for. I'm very optimistic about them hitting the 30 exahash, which would about triple them from where they are now. So if you're telling me this company is going to triple their output, keep their energy costs and roughly their margins the same, I think that's the big reason why we've seen this huge run up. They've had a price discovery, and I think deservedly so. But then real briefly, to kick over to the other side, they're not just a pure play miner. They do have the deal with Poolside, an existing HPC vertical at 15 million, and they're growing it. There's a lot of rumors. I'm not sure exactly where they fall down to these data center developments, but big news yesterday, hiring Morgan Stanley, looking at ways to monetize the data centers, looking at HPC deals. Been very vocal from Dan Roberts on down. I had a chance to talk to Kent Draper on our spaces. Sharp guy. He runs their HPC. There's a lot in the works there. We don't know what the deal looks like yet. We're all waiting, but I think we're all expecting a deal to come sometime this year, and a fairly large one for high performance computing with Iris Energy, in addition to tripling their exahash to 30 in a very achievable way. This price still seems cheap to me. It just feels like there's a lot more room to run. The megawatts they have in their land portfolio, I know it's a ways out, but the development site in Texas is still a whole nother area that we haven't even got to yet, because we're probably looking at 2026. And there's even more that's undisclosed beyond the 1,400 that we know about in the development site. They have a lot of optionality between the Bitcoin and the HPC. I really like the leadership team. I like the clear communication. I like how they're structuring their play. I do think that this 188% run up in the 3 months is more of a harbinger than an end.
What did you make of the short report?
I've seen Riot get attacked. I've seen Huck get attacked. I've seen a lot of companies with short reports in the sector get attacked. I don't think there was a whole lot of validity to it. I think a lot of those points are things that Dan Roberts and IREN has really come out in front and said. They're trying to get down to the nitty gritty of, well, Childress isn't this for HPC and it doesn't deliver this quality of HPC. Well, listen, I don't think Childress is really their big HPC plays. Those are a lot of the ones they have up in British Columbia. Childress is really about their Bitcoin mining. Short reports take a little bit of truth and they distort it. And they do it to make money. I don't really feel there's a lot there to say. I think IREN did the best thing they maybe could do in the interim, which seems to me to just say, we're aware of it, we're moving on, we're growing the company. Unfortunately, these things tend to get legal. I've seen Dan Roberts and others on the IREN team take people who have said a lot of similar things to Short Report on X and literally take the time to reply to them point by point by point, which honestly, they don't have to do. But this is a little bit different now. This enters the legal realm. When you have a short report like this, you see litigation come against these companies. And I think for that reason, they're kind of reluctant to really say anything unless it comes out vetted through their legal team, which takes a little bit of time.
Makes sense.
And the fact is, this company put in a short-term trade as well to benefit that report coming out. So they actually shorted the stock for a period of time. But I agree with what you say there, DR. And you know, I've been following IREN now for over 2.5, nearly 3 years. It'll be 3 years in November. And so they've been part of my analysis since they've been a public miner. In fact, Dan reached out to me and asked me if could he join the group, and I said you can join the group. Just provide me your data on a monthly basis, and they have done. And actually, in terms of monthly updates, you look at the IREN update, and you sort of think when you've read that update from start to finish, you're satisfied with the information that you've seen that update. It covers everything. They're one of the few miners that actually cover their non self mining. In terms of they cover all the business entities there. So Sam does it with Bit Digital, but some of the other miners don't really cover anything more than the self mining in any full spec. But IREN do. I agree that the Childress site probably isn't, because of location as well, isn't sort of fit for purpose for HPC, because the weather's going to be an impact there with GPUs, and it gets really hot. So there are some elements to the fact that British Columbia is a far better location, and actually HPC doesn't need the amount of power that Bitcoin mining does. So in terms of driving revenues, you only need 10% of the power to get the same revenues through HPC than you do through Bitcoin mining. So British Columbia could easily be the HPC hub, and then leave Childress to produce Bitcoin mining. And when they get to the end of this, their target for this year, I think it's 260 megawatts at Childress. We're complete. They've still got a stack of megawatts there left. It's a 600 megawatt site, so that'll cover them going into next year's target as well. The site for development at the moment, which is still not broken ground, you're looking at least 2 years from when the spades go in there to get that site prepared. We know that from other mining companies building similar size facilities. They may well decide, because that site there will have a valuation on it. They've bought the land, and they've probably bought the rights to do things with the power on that land there. And therefore, it's got a value, and probably got a significant value now. If these hyperscalers want to do something really quickly and have got the capital to do it, bear in mind, IREN at the moment haven't got the capital to sort of like start delivering that site now. They're focusing on Childress like that. That's the next project to do. And to deliver that, you're again looking at serious amounts of ATM to start delivering that site. I mean, look at what Riot have spent at Corsicana over the last sort of 18 months since they broke ground. It's a lot of money. That's just to build the site. Then you've got to fit the site with GPUs, and those GPUs that they've purchased for the poolside contract. You're looking at $30,000 per GPU, and they've got 800 of them. And so start looking at the capital cost of that there for effectively that's in terms of comparison with say Bit Digital, that's quite a small contract. Bit Digital have gone out there and got they're going to have 2,048 GPUs, and you've got the likes of IREN with 800. So, Sam's got, getting on for nearly twice as many, or more than twice as many GPUs, nearly 3 times many GPUs. And he's not going to stop at where he's at the moment. So there's a lot of investment in this business. So to grow HPC, to grow Childress, and then you've got this other development side. They may well think, actually, you know what? It might make sense for us to sell on that site there. 1.4 gigawatts potential power there. That would fit any hyperscaler quite nicely in the current climate. Or if they can get something like, if there's another CoreWeave out there, or even CoreWeave themselves that says, come on, we can do this. But I don't know, again, is the location of that 1.4 gigawatt site suitable, and how much would you have to spend to get that site fit for purpose for GPUs to be to be processed at the correct temperature and environment. So those are the challenges. I think people see that sort of paragraph, think, oh, it's just going to happen in just click of the fingers and it's all going to be there. There's a lot of planning involved. If they're planning for 2 years, they will have already ordered all the power parts for that site, because they're on a 12-18 month lead time. So there's no way you can order them lastminute.com. They take a long time. That's why Jason was saying at Corsicana, we broke ground in October 2022. We only energized our first miners in April 2024. That's a full 18 months to energization. They've got 500 staff on the site. So, people are, I think, people just need to manage expectation. If they do run with that site, you are looking at the end of 2026 at the earliest. And the other part about pipeline of another gigawatt, well, all these companies now are coming out with pipelines of gigawatts. Even Soluna have got a 1 gigawatt pipeline. So I'm not too concerned with that there. The site will be worth something. The 1.4 gigawatt site will definitely be worth something. If it's got access to that amount of power, that is definitely a valuable asset on their balance sheet. Because somebody will come in there and say, we can do that now, rather than wait 2 years.
Yeah, for sure. No, this is going to be an interesting one to watch. And I know it's definitely a crowd favorite on both of our channels. Now, and Anthony, when we were talking about the HODL situation there, let me see if I can find the slide. Marathon caught my attention. Yeah, over 18.5 thousand Bitcoin on their balance sheet now. We also just got a comment about Marathon, whether or not we've covered the stock yet today. So perfect time to introduce Marathon to the discussion. We're starting to see Bitcoin and hash price turn the corner here. So it seems Marathon's got more Bitcoin than any of the other miners. Anthony, what are your thoughts on the industry giant here? They just crossed, I think, the $7 billion market cap. I'll bring up the market cap slide here. Yeah, 7.2 billion as of yesterday.
Yeah,
really running away from the pack.
This company's market cap hit 8 billion in 2021, so we're still playing a little bit catch up to the highs there. And people constantly ask me, when will Marathon hit the share price highs of 2021? Well, that's not going to happen for a long time, because bear in mind, when it was at 8 billion market capitalization, there was less than 100 million shares in the company. Now there's 300 million shares in the company. And for it to get to $80 again, you're going to have a market capitalization of about 24 billion. So, we're still a way away from that there. But if the Bitcoin price hits $150,000, $200,000, then maybe so. But at the same time, all these companies are using ATM. So the number of shares is constantly increasing. Every quarter, we're seeing 20, 30 million shares added to these companies, shares outstanding. But Marathon's share price at last couple of days, or the last week or so, has been really moving. It was sort of like under $20, and it got to $27 earlier today. It's dropped off like all the mining stocks have, because Bitcoin price back down closer to 64,000 at the moment. But the Marathon for me, could potentially have walked away from this whole sector and left everyone standing, because once they'd we're sort of getting towards that 23 exahash, which it took them a year longer than they anticipated getting there because of a lot of issues. Bear in mind, they were an asset-light company, so they were light, being hosted and having limited control over any of their sites, caused problems. For me, the disappointment over the last 2 years has been consistency. So Marathon. I can name probably 2 months or 3 months at the most in the last 2 years where they've had actually good production in terms of what I would expect the company to achieve. One of those we talked about before was December 2023, where they produced 1,854 Bitcoin. Phenomenal amounts of Bitcoin, broke every record in the book. Had a fantastic month, and we're all saying, like, this is the start, this is the turning point. And I said to Bryce, hang on, Bryce, I said, I know what the track record's been like for the last 18 months. Let's just wait to see January's update and see where that number is in January. If it's another 1,800, I'll go along with it. And it came out at 1,000. So they'd had a drop of 800 Bitcoin over it, and yes, there was a little bit of difficulty, but there wasn't 800 Bitcoin difficulty. And again, in sort of like February, it wasn't a great number. They're starting to get more machines energized, so that's the issue they've got at the moment. They've got all the machines in place, so they've got over 30 exahash of machines installed. If we look at June, they had about 26 exahash energized, and yes, they're starting. This quarter will be the first quarter they've produced more Bitcoin than Core Scientific in the last 3.5 years. That just puts it into context. So Core Scientific, go back 3 years ago, they were effectively the biggest Bitcoin mining company in terms of hash rate. And they just, the difference between Core Scientific and Marathon is just one word. It's all about consistency. When you're consistent, I can sort of write their report from at the end of the month. Core don't have to write their report for me. I can probably do it myself. They put the daily update out on a tweet every day. So you can just do the calculations quite quickly. And, it's standard. It's 13, 14 Bitcoin every day. It's not, the Marathon, I keep seeing these tweets by the Marapigs. We mined 70 Bitcoin yesterday. And then the following day, it's down to 3. And then the next day, it's at 5. And the next day, it goes up to 20. I want to see Marathon getting 30, 40 Bitcoin every day, constant. I don't want to see these these swings, whatever. I don't know what's going on, because it's just, there's no sort of correlation with what their hash rate is and the production. We have these one-off months that are fantastic and the news is great, and then the next 3 months it's like scratching our heads and saying, where are they? And if you look at a sort of I think I've even sent you the slide, which would be good to show now, Bryce, is the 6 monthly year-to-date slide for the Bitcoin miners. And just look at Marathon and compare to the peer miners over that period, and they're probably hanging around. Not the market cap one. Look at
which one, Anthony?
One of my slides, that the year to date Bitcoin production by exahash.
Find it here.
So it's the one with 6 months on it.
They just pulled positive, I think, for the first time yesterday.
It's not there. That's the one. So if you look at this here again, so Marathon, they're in 11th place. And actually they've had the last couple of months haven't been too bad, but you can go back there to to January. The likes of BitFarms producing 60 Bitcoin, Marathon were doing 56. BitFarms were doing 49 in February, Marathon were doing 47.
And Anthony, just explain what we're looking at here for people who haven't seen this.
So this is the amount of Bitcoin each miner produces per exahash for each month. And if you look at those tables if you look at 22, 23, and 23, 24, 24, now we're in now, you look at BitFarms and Hive, they've been the top 2 miners over the last 3 years. IREN have also been in that top 3 group since they've been public. SATO, we only started looking at SATO coming up to about nearly a year ago now, and they've been sort of in that top 4. DMG, another one that have been consistent in the top half, and you've got TeraWulf. Griffin Mining have had some great months since they've gone public as well. So, and then you start looking at the bottom there. Well, we know HUT have had issues with they've had umpteen issues with regards to power providers, with regards to Drumheller, with regards to energization. So, discount HUT at the moment, they've had so many issues. Then you've got the likes of Riot, and we know Riot, Jason came out and said, look, we might be quoting a hash rate of 12, but we're really only operating at 8. So in terms of their utilization, that means their productivity has not been great. But you get to Marathon, the biggest, effectively the biggest mining company, and they're currently at 11th in terms of production overall for the year to date. And actually, there's there's not a great deal between Marathon, Core Scientific, BitDeer there. So, the gap is closing between top to bottom. So, last year the gap was wider. A lot more of these miners are now getting their production where it needs to be. So the gap between those top 6 or 7 is actually, in terms of percentage, 3 or 4% covers the first 7 or 8 miners. But, Marathon, we hear these one-off, and DR, you'll back me up on this. You see the Mara pigs come out there. We mined 20 blocks yesterday, and everyone else is doing 2 blocks. But you don't hear that same message for about 3 or 4 days, because they seem to have managed a week's Bitcoin in one day, and then it's like nothing for 5 days. It's like, it's just not consistent. Whereas Core Scientific, every day they put the return out. It's like, a regular thing.
One difference there, Anthony, I think would be they run their own pool, right? So they're going to receive blocks at a time, which it's going to increase the volatility of their daily return.
Yeah, but they still, the pools. So the pools work by, obviously, if Marathon have got, say, 30 exahash, and the global hash rate is 600, they control 5% of the global hash rate. Now, all things being equal, that means that every day Marathon should be mining 5% of the 450 Bitcoin. That's how it works. If you're providing that level of hash rate, if you're in a mining pool, so Marathon have got their own mining pool, which was built by Sheldon of DMG for them. When you look at these big mining pools, where you've got probably 30% of the global hash rate, if you want to join that pool, you can turn around and say, right, I will take. I want to guarantee my Bitcoin I receive from this pool. So if the pool's got 30% of the global hash rate, and you've got 10% of the pool, you can pretty much articulate what you'd expect to get, and they'll give you a deal close to that number. It won't be exact that number. They might take 1 or 2% off that number, but they anticipate they're going to get those number of blocks. And luck does play a very, very small part. Luck plays the same part as if you're going out tomorrow and buying a lottery ticket for the weekend, and your ticket comes up. So if DR's got 3 ASICs in his garage, and he controls something like 0.0001% of the global network, but his machine mines a Bitcoin next week, he's won the lottery. Because that should never happen, effectively. So the whole point is it's predictable. So a company can go to the pool and say, we should be getting 20 Bitcoin a day because we've got this amount of hash rate, and the pool say we'll give you 19.8 Bitcoin a day. The other point too is cover our costs, and also the fact that there is an element of luck there. And you go, yeah, I'll take 19.8. It's guaranteed. I know exactly what I'm going to get every day coming through like that. And that's how some of these contracts are worked out. You have a level of predictability. You can also say, I will get my fair share of what the pool achieves. So you can sort of effectively say, it's not gambling, but it's basically saying, if the pool is 30%, but it actually achieves 33% of the Bitcoin produced, so it does better because it's a big pool, it's got more lottery tickets, and therefore it's got a chance of winning a little bit more. You benefit because you've turned around and said, I'm going to take my chance and see what the pool gets. Now, sometimes it could be 33%, you get a bit more. It could be 27%, you get a bit less. So that's how the pools work in terms of, when you sign up for something, you can either have a guaranteed revenue stream, or you can have, let's see what happens, and you get what the pool gets, and take the with that there.
Now, Anthony, I appreciate the explanation, and we don't talk about pools a lot, or maybe enough on the channel. It is interesting that Sheldon from DMG constructed the Mara pool, and obviously such an important part of Marathon.
He did 2 pools. Just to break that down again, he actually created the Terra pool, which was one that DMG and Argo blockchain were using, and that was really highlighting those miners that were using 100% renewable energy. So they were trying to create this green pool, and I don't know if I'm not sure if DMG is still using that pool because their amount of Bitcoin is so small that when you look at the pool sizes, I don't know if it comes up as a percentage. Marathons, even though it's them at the moment, because they've got 5% of the global hash rate, it does come up between 4 and 5% of the size. Their pool is a decent size, even with one company in it. And one thing to add about pools is a lot of these companies, these mining companies, may be operating in more than one pool. So there's no, you don't say I'm all in on Foundry or all in on this or Ant pool. You might find that they have, different hash rate in different pools. It might be by jurisdiction or whatever like that. It might say, right, our Canadian miners in this pool, or that, and so basically sometimes it's covering a bit of risk there as well. So
that's a good point.
It's not unusual for miners being, 2 to 3 pools.
Interesting. Now, looking at this chart, since we have it up on the screen here, you can see BitFarms obviously really taking a run for it, right? Coming in first place over the past 6 months in terms of the number of Bitcoin they can mine per exahash each and every month. With the halving thrown in there, able to successfully navigate that and stay on top. Now, Riot has made a buyout attempt at BitFarms, citing their strong operations as really one of the key factors in that M&A targeting. This is exactly what they're talking about, right? Ben and the rest of the team are top-notch operators in terms of Bitcoin mining. So, DR, I wanted to get your take on BitFarms. Now that they've got the new CEO, Ben's at the helm, do you think they will, and do you think they should engage in any M&A with Riot or any other company?
I'm going to go no on both. And this is completely just my opinion. I've been following this, as everyone has in the sector. Had a chance to be on the spaces that Sebastian Ski hosted with Ben earlier this week, I think on Monday. And Ben, although he really couldn't comment on it, I think he's got the pulse of what BitFarms is really want to go forward and do. I don't think they're looking to merge. I think they got a clear vision, or at least Ben certainly does, about where he wants to grow this company. Anthony brought it up way earlier in the conversation about their potential to get into HPC. And some of the comments he made there I thought were very interesting in the new site that it's acquired in Pennsylvania and the capacity it does have, which was in their June production report, in his comments that it's HPC compatible. They also, as a recent board of directors hire who has HPC background. And you put a few things together, and Ben is really interested in possibly pursuing that route. But even on the Bitcoin side, BitFarms, as Anthony's data shows, operates very effectively. They're growing to 21 exahash at 21 efficiency, Project Blackjack they call it, by the end of this year. What they have going on in Paraguay, international with geographic diversity, operating 4 different countries, with progression to 35 exahash by 2025. They have miners on order. They have power agreements locked up at the Yangtze Dam and the dam in Paraguay. I don't really think they need anyone to help them. I don't think they're looking for an M&A. They didn't ask for this. Riot came to them. Apparently, from what we know, from what's been put out by Riot's side, they've been pursuing them for a few months. They don't felt that BitFarms took that approach seriously, and now they're forcing a shareholder meeting. BitFarms looks like they're fighting it. They put in a poison pill, so to speak, or a shareholder protection plan, trying to cap it at 15 when normally the law is at 20. They have a hearing on that plan next week, actually, in Corp that'll give us a lot more color. But they don't want this. They wouldn't be taking the approach they've been doing and not getting back to Riot and fighting to protect their shareholders and putting in lower thresholds if this is something they were looking forward to doing. I'm of the mind BitFarms wants to pursue this on their own and has a strong plan in place. Unfortunately, this is going to play out through the courts first and through the board meeting second.
Anthony, I'm curious to get your take there because you've actually done a bit of research, and it looks like this conversation between BitFarms and Riot has taken place for a little bit longer than we initially thought. Hey,
yeah, they started talking March last year, so this is like 15 months, and it only came to light obviously a couple of months ago because of they obviously had confidentiality between them, and actually that was a. We were finding out, every game before England played who the team was going to be. The team news was getting leaked for all these matches in the Euros, and yet we didn't hear anything for 14 months on that. Riot were interested in buying BitFarms. Now, my take's slightly different from DR. I do agree. BitFarms can manage on their own. They're going to go out there and do that. They're going to, hopefully, they'll get to 21 exahash by the end of the year. But I look at it from the, and people say, why, why are Riot, their performance hasn't been great, and they're going to, look to buy, looking to buy the best mining company out there from a productivity perspective. It's one metric, but they're a well-run company. They've got zero debt. They operate in 4 countries, 15 sites. So from Riot's perspective, why wouldn't you go out and seek to buy one of the best companies out there from a value perspective as well? I mean, their price they offered was 30% higher than the average share price had been the 3 months before. And yes, it wasn't. People will say that wasn't enough for BitFarms. Please tell me what the valuation of BitFarms is, and tell me what the valuation of all these other companies should be, because I'm interested to get people's take on that. But for Riot going in and looking to buy BitFarms, this is down to the shareholders. It's not down to anyone at BitFarms. Ben Gagnon won't have a say. They don't control enough of the shares. The top 2 shareholders in the top shareholder in BitFarms is actually Riot. They own 14.9% of the shares. The next biggest shareholder inside the company is the 2 co-founders. They own 2.4% of BitFarms. So their voice is going zero in terms of what they can achieve there. This will go down to shareholders, and shareholders will vote. For me, it's a win-win for Riot and for BitFarms. I mean, if BitFarms becomes part of the bigger organization, they effectively become the biggest mining company overnight. And with that, you get all the economies of scale of being the biggest, and probably, potentially then being the best miner as well, because you're going to have all those the nuances that BitFarms do brought into Riot, the share ideas and things like that, and get things really moving. But if it doesn't go ahead, Riot have got a 15% stake in BitFarms currently, and that could rise to 19.9% stake if they're successful through the Corp, because as DR said there, they're looking to increase. The normal threshold is 20%, and BitFarms have tried to alleviate that at 15%. Hence, Riot have gone in at 14.9% in terms of shares. But if they walk away from this deal, and the share price at the moment is hovering just under $3, they're walking away there with a 33% profit for cash that they had in the bank. That's and I know. I mean, from Jason and the team's perspective, I think they wanted to have a conversation and say, look, if that offering wasn't as what you expected, come back and have a discussion about where you think it should be. Where do you think the value is? And we can value these mining companies. There is a sort of like a floor now in terms of hash rate valuation for some of these miners. It's been quoted at about 100 million. We know that CleanSpark, when they've grown their last sort of like 6 or 7 exahash, they've been growing it at sort of like 25 million an exahash. When you look at CleanSpark's valuation for their 20 exahash plus at the moment, and they've got a 4 billion market capitalization, you can see the value of their, maybe producing it for 25 million, but the value of their hash rate is about 200 million. And then you go to someone like Hive Digital, who've got 5 exahash, and their valuation is something like 40 million per exahash. So there's a real disparity. So what is the true value of a mining company's hash rate? Is it 200 at one end, or is it 40 million at the sort of like at the lower end? And bear in mind, when I wrote that article on Hive literally 6 weeks ago, the valuation of their hash rate then was 18. The share prices had a nice little bit of a surge in that period of time. So $18 million per exahash compared to Marathon and Riot and Cipher and CleanSpark, which are in the same article, well over 100 million per exahash. What is a true valuation? So I don't think Riot were a million miles away by offering something like 100 million or slightly over 100 million per exahash for BitFarms, but people are saying, oh, it should be $7 per share. Well, $7 per share would put BitFarms sort of between CleanSpark and Marathon Digital, and to be honest with you, they're not between CleanSpark and Marathon Digital in terms of valuation. So people need to be more realistic. I'm sort of like, I've got shares in both camps. For me, if BitFarms now with Ben at the head of the company can deliver what they're supposed to deliver this year, and look at that site in Pennsylvania, maybe utilize that for some HPC, because we see that's the conversation at the moment. Maybe the valuation comes from that there. If Riot is successful and the shareholders think, which at the moment, I think the shareholders are probably, from what I've seen on social media, I think there's not a lot of people wanting to, the BitFarm shareholders wanting to be part of the Riot group. But I can see the positives in both sides. I really hope BitFarms can do it for themselves, but I also see the benefits of being part of a bigger organization. And you will have a hash rate of over 50 exahash, and you'll have everyone trying to chase you. And bear in mind, there'll be no issue with BitFarms achieving their goal, because Riot have got a bank of about $1 billion in the treasury plus. And so, it takes anything out from a capital perspective. They're just a sort of like a money producing machine, where BitFarms are not in that league, to be honest with you, nowhere near.
Yeah. Now, DR, we've got Riot up on the screen here since we were talking about them in relation to BitFarms. Again, if you look at a 3-month view here, you guys, only 51% return, lagging the group, and a lot of, I guess, two things working kind of against Riot. The HPC angle, Jason has come out and said, hey, we're not interested in pursuing HPC. We're going to stay pure play. So they didn't really benefit from that boom cycle or bullish catalyst. And then also Bitcoin prices pulled back. They're a big hodler of Bitcoin. They've got a lot of capacity coming online this year. Do you think the market is accurately pricing Riot at these levels, DR?
Clearly not. There's no way that they are, just based on pure play or not. Exahash value alone and what they're projecting to, as Anthony's gone on, dictates a better price from this. And I do think there's a few reasons for it. There's a short report by Carousel Capital, really did them a lot of damage, was well timed. There has been a flux towards HPC and AI that has stolen a lot of the pure play miners' thunder. But you see the slope at the end of that curve. Not today, but the last 3 or 4 days, this has begun to really come up. And hey, I'll take 51% in 3 months if I'm being fair. When Riot is getting to over 30 end of this year, and they're doing it at big scale, again, back to point, a large facility, vertically integrated, where you can produce those buildings one by one. There's a lot less moving parts, a lot more streamlined in the approach. And Riot is, let's give them one thing. Their plan has been big. It's ambitious. They build big sites. They know what they're doing. My one takeaway with Riot has been costs. And, I think the earlier metric Anthony had on there, people like to bang on Riot for different things, such as, share-based compensation or operating costs. And I understand. You can speak much more to that with the metrics than I can. From a pure value of exahash and producing what they're going to produce in 30 and then 40 and even beyond at these large facilities, this is not a $12 stock. So yes, to answer your question, it's very undervalued. I do own Riot for that reason.
Makes sense. Now we've got a number of other companies left on the list here. Core Scientific, I think maybe would be fitting here. Next up, Anthony. We have been to the facility in person. We've met the staff. We've actually got cores on our panels here coming up in Nashville next week as well. So if you look at the share price return here, DR, you say you're happy with 51%, which I am as well. Anyone holding Core Scientific should be very happy with 325% in the last 3 months. That's over 100% return per month, you guys. And that was on top of being the top performing stock last year as well. So, Anthony, I know you've been beating the Core Scientific drum for quite some time. We got a lot of information at that Investor Day presentation, interacting with a lot of the big Core Scientific shareholders. What are your thoughts on Core right now?
Yeah, very positive. You seen a company that sort of, took its medicine, went through Chapter 11, just over a year in Chapter 11, came up with a plan. So the plan was a very detailed plan, and it had a lot of, they had to have a lot of conversations with some of their debtors as to how they were going to repay them. Some of them went for, a replacement of debt with shares. We've seen actually some Bitmain actually invested in Core Scientific, so they gave them mining machines for stock, and so I think Bitmain own about 5% of the company. They came out of Chapter 11 with this plan, and this plan was based on a total of about 5 years to try and get to where they need to do. The good news is they've done that in the first 6 months. So they had targets for these warrants that they had issued. So the shareholders saw the stock. There was a stock split of effectively for every 10 shares there was 1 share created. And so, shareholders were given warrants, and there was some like people scratching their head about, how's this going to work now? And my shares in Core Scientific are, worth a lot less than they were last year. And bear in mind, in 2023, we saw the share price rise from 4 cents all the way up, 1,100% during that year. If you were able to buy at the lowest point, you made some serious money. But we've seen this share price actually do amazingly well this year, year to date. And it's just every update it brings out, it just seems to be another great update. So, they were already, share prices all doing well before that announcement on June the 3rd, which was the first big announcement. We've got to deal with CoreWeave. And at the same time, and I think it was like within the same day, they also announced the contract first, and then literally a few hours later, they announced that CoreWeave actually put in a bid for them. So I don't know. I don't think the timeline was. I think obviously the bid was before the contract, but I don't think there was much time before it, because they said we have just received, and they put the date of the 3rd of June as well. So I don't know how long Core Scientific actually looked at the deal. I mean, it was $1 billion deal to buy the company outright and take on the debt. So effectively, I think their enterprise value at the time was something like about 1.6, 1.7 billion. So that would have been effectively how it would have worked. And Core Scientific realized at that point in time, this is so undervalued from what we're doing. CoreWeave then turned around and wanted to make a deal to get some of the power. And, now they've got a contract for 270 megawatts for the next 12 years with 2 5-year potential increases in that contract. So effectively, you could have a contract for 22 years with CoreWeave. That contract over 12 years is somewhere in the region of 4.7 billion, delivering 3.7 billion in net profit over that period of time. That's 80%, in terms of the last 10 years, 80% profits for the in terms of net profits of that company. That's amazing to do that. They've still got another 230 megawatts to utilize. They've put 500 megawatts to one side for power to be used for HPC hosting. We were in a room there at Denton with 40, 50 analysts and a few retail. So when we say retail investors, we're doing them a bit of disservice there. The retail investor that was sat on the table next to us, Bryce, had a portfolio of Core Scientific of about $120 million. So he was probably what I call a significant holder of shares. And if you think about
different type of retail than you and me, hey, Anthony?
Well, if you think about the share price, think about the share price and the warrant price on when we went to Denton, which was about the 11th of June, and where that share price is today, how much is that portfolio worth now if he hasn't sold any of those shares or warrants? It's going to be double. So he'll have 240 million tied into Core Scientific, and he's a retail investor with a nice car. That's but we were sat there with these analysts from the big New York firms, and we sat there. Me and you were fortunate to get one of our questions answered. We both asked the Bitcoin mining question. The other 48 questions, which are all in the script, you can go read all the questions, were all about HPC. And so, they've come out with some great updates on this there. But at the same time, Adam is still a Bitcoin miner. They're still Bitcoin mining. They've got one of the biggest operational hash rates. They're growing the hash rate. Now they've paid off the first $260 million of debt has already been paid off. So that got converted into 45 million shares last week. So actually, when you put that market capitalization up before, Bryce, you need to add on about another 600 million to that market capitalization. Core Scientific at the moment, and this is without any of their warrants being produced. Activated. They've got a market cap of about 2.6 billion. So, and the other good piece of news is that both other warrants, the Cause W warrant and the Cause Z warrant, are both now can be activated. They both reach their requirement to be activated. So, once the Cause W warrant, people start transferring that in for a warrant and paying the $6.93 or whatever it is. That money then goes back into the company. it clears the remaining amount of debt, and once that debt's being cleared off, once all the warrants are exercised, it gives them 400 million of a cash runway to start doing what they need to do as a company. And all the caveats that they're currently under, believe you me, you come out of Chapter 11, you don't just get told you can operate as normal. No, they are under certain caveats. They must sell Bitcoin within 10 days of mining it. And so all those caveats in place are removed, and it gives more and more freedom of control to Adam and the team there, who we got to meet. We got to meet all the senior staff at Denton. Really good team. I think, this is just a start. I think when we talked about Bit Digital being undervalued, I think you can look at Core Scientific and say that contract alone, if somebody can tell me, if you're going to get effectively nearly $1 million a day in profit for the next 12 years, how much is that? What if you put that in a price earnings calculation? So I know some of, I know DR and Sebastian and some of the other guys out there, they look at price earnings and they come up with the 15 or 20x in terms of, what these tech companies would use as a ratio. Then please tell me what the valuation of that company is. And that's just from a HPC perspective. This is a Bitcoin miner that does HPC. So, the valuation, once all the warrants have been converted, at today's price, you're looking at a $4.5 billion company. And actually, is $4.5 billion the right valuation? I think it's not. I think if Marathon's valued at $7 billion, then Core Scientific is matching that and more with the HPC contract.
DR, what are your thoughts?
I mean, Anthony ran the gamut there. He knows his company really well. I've learned a lot from his coverage on it, to be fair. I agree that eating the 45 million shares and not missing a beat by raising that market cap showed a lot of strength. And I also agree that where we're all concerned about CoreWeave and HPC, they're a darn good Bitcoin miner. Every day, 12, 13 Bitcoin like clockwork. Consistency. And they're mining about 20 exahash, and they're doing it pretty efficiently. Once these warrants clear, they have a cash runway in place. He laid it out well. They have incredible predictable revenues coming on next year. They're not done. There's more megawatts in the queue they're going to ink deals with. This thing is a monster. I don't see any reason not to have a healthy chunk of cores in my portfolio.
Sorry, guys, I was just coming off mute there. Yeah, cores is one that I was unfortunately a little late to the game on, but Anthony has definitely taught me a lot about this company as well. Going to the Denton facility, seeing it firsthand, really was a big turning point for me in terms of Core Scientific. So curious in the comment section here, you guys, what are your thoughts on this one? Anthony, you hit the nail on the head. There's so much HPC discussion with Core Scientific. People forget that they've mined more Bitcoin than anyone else for 3 years. Right. They're the biggest, best, most efficient, most, as you say, stable, consistent Bitcoin miner, DR, over the last 36 months, but they're also the leader in the HPC space right now. So just absolutely incredible. Now, the next company I wanted to talk about is DMG Blockchain. So they're a smaller miner. We've included them in our coverage for quite some time, Anthony. They operate up here in Canada in Christina Lake. I wanted to bring up the chart on this one because if you look at market cap here in the $100 million range, you can see over the last month, they've seen a nice little jump in share price as well, kind of from the 48-cent range up to the 58-cent range. So I'm curious to see from a small miner perspective, you talk about valuations per exahash, where you see DMG fitting in there.
Well, DMG's valuation at the moment is just under 100 million, and they've got effectively 1 exahash, which is soon, by the end of July, we should see that at 1.7 exahash. So if you're then using that as a way of valuing hash rate, that will then take you down to sort of like about $60 million per exahash. And if you compare that to the likes of IREN, CleanSpark, Cipher, they're close to between 150 and 200 million per exahash. So again,
keep in mind this is Canadian, Anthony, Canadian.
Oh, is that so? Even less than, isn't it?
Even more so, to your point, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, 98 Canadian. What's that? About 60 million in US dollars.
I thought you were going to make a joke there, Anthony. Say it's about $10 US or something like that. I think we did around 65 million or something.
65 million. So 65 million, 1.7 exahash. You know, you're looking at probably 36, 37 million dollars an exahash. You know, again, it's significantly lower. That sort of, so DMG from a valuation per exahash is probably on a par with the likes of Hive Digital, but Hive Digital has got a HPC business. So you know, in terms of they're the, you know, two of, you know, we look at now the smaller miners. I really wish we had a chart from, you know, from sort of like maybe at the beginning of this year where we would see that Hive are actually valued this year, I think even more than TeraWulf, IREN and some others at certain points. It's just this last, you know, the gap's just gone massive over the last month or so. It's just ridiculous. Now we've got so many. We had 3 miners over $1 billion market capitalization. Now we've got maybe 11 or 12 over $1 billion, and it's happened really, really quickly. But no, DMG, you know, it's, you know, Sheldon has built that company up from the bottom himself, and you know, they do things obviously on a smaller scale there. We've been waiting for this growth to come through, so we were expecting this extra 700 petahash for a couple of months now. They've had a few delays, but on their last update, which came out in the first week of July, they did state in there that they expect it to be energized, and that'll be a nice boost. I mean, if you go from 1 exahash to 1.7 exahash in a month, that's a nice rise. You know, that's like, you know, that's like IREN going from, you know, from 10 exahash to 17 exahash. It's a nice rise for a small miner, and might be give them the momentum, give the share price something to look at, and you know, take them further. Yeah, so it's a good news update, but we want to see more from the smaller miners.
Yeah, and I just wanted to pull up that market cap. I actually have the red box around companies over $1 billion now, Anthony, and we have 10 in the $1 billion club. Now, DR, I'm curious to get your thoughts. Another big mover over the last 3 months here. You can see 200% gains for Hut 8 Corp. Asher has told us, judge me on Q3 results. And really, since he's taken over at this company, share price has done nothing but go up and to the right. So a lot of excitement here for Hut 8 in terms of the megawatts under management. They've got HPC. They've been involved in HPC for quite some time. Plus, they've got their self-mining business, which is really moving in the right direction. What are your thoughts on Hut 8 Corp at these levels?
Hut's a little bit harder one for me to get a handle on. Like you said, there's a lot of moving parts. I think you hit the nail on the head, Bryce. Their biggest asset is their energy pipeline. And we are all very eager into what Asher and the group is going to do in order to deploy that. I love the deal, getting a strategic partner in Co2, bringing in an influx of capital to bring out their first data center, which they announced last week. They're using those funds in order to grow. And I do think that all the sum of the parts analysis here, we start talking about hosting, you start talking about data centers, Bitcoin mining. If you're going to judge him by third quarter results, then we're going to judge him favorably. And there certainly does seem to be a breath of fresh air in there, you know, post the merger with USBTC and the changeover from Jamie. I like the direction they're going. I'm not sure how to fairly value it. If you look at some of the metrics with costs, I can't get my head around it yet. And not to despair them, but they didn't really come out with some of the recent updates. They talked a little bit about how they're going to approach updates going forward, how they want to incorporate more of a wider approach, which I think your platform has started to do and is wise, to not just look at exahash, not just look at the standard metrics, but to incorporate megawatts. I'm interested really to dive into the next quarter to get an understand on their cash burn, especially post-halving. I think Q2 is going to be very rough on a lot of companies, and Hut might be one of them as far as the cost of operations. And size-wise, their exahash production seems to be now more of a back burner play for them. Hut's only at 5.7 exahash per second. I don't know if I've seen any forward growth to really grow that anything above the 5.7. Looks like most of their energy now has gone into hosting. It's gone into HPC. I'm very bullish on the deal with Co2 to get 9% interest loan, basically, and a key strategic partner. They're building out data centers with the money already. And I think that they're pointed the right way there. Before I really invest into Hut, and I'm not currently in them, I need to get a better handle on their costs. I love the energy pipeline, and Sue has been fantastic to talk to on numerous occasions, laying out a great vision. And certainly, the market has loved what it's seen lately. It's up 200% in the last 3 months, most of that in the last month and a half. And there's a lot of reasons here to think Asher and the team got it pointed the right way.
Yeah, I think so too. A really successful story for Asher and the rest of the team at Hut 8 Corp. This is one that I've held and continue to hold for quite some time. Sue was actually my first interview in the Bitcoin mining space about 3 years ago now, and really one of the key people that got me interested in the sector overall. Now, next up, I wanted to flip it to you, Anthony, for Soluna. We talk about growth and potential pipeline and megawatts. Soluna, despite their size, they've got an impressive pipeline, which John explained to us is basically weighted on probability of closing these deals. So when they talk about a 1 gigawatt pipeline, it's likely quite a bit bigger than that, and they've assigned percentages. Hey, we think this is 10%, 40%, whatever, to come up with that gigawatt figure. They're up an impressive 330% over the last 3 months. I know this was one of the key stocks in your pension fund, and you continue to update me on how well that's doing. What is your outlook on Soluna?
Yeah, I've been following Soluna for quite a while. They've been part of my analysis now for all this year. They are one of the smaller companies, but at the end of the day, when I started doing this, over 3 years ago, IREN were about the same size as Soluna. They had actually half an exahash in terms of hash rate. Soluna have got actually 0.8 of an exahash. They've got more hash rate than IREN had, 2.5 years ago. That's only one part of the business. So they've got about 1.7 exahash in terms of hosted mining machines. And I might be wrong. I think they host Griffin actually as one of their host companies. So, but they've also, on the 24th of June, they announced the Soluna Cloud business. And so they've now, entered an agreement with a strategic partner to secure some GPUs, which they've already received. This is a 3-year contract that will deliver between 38 million and 80 million of revenue over the next 3 years. And if you look at their market capitalization on that chart we looked at before, again, it was significantly low. It's the lowest of the miners that we. Well, I think SATO might be slightly low, but it's around sort of like $25-30 million in terms of market capitalization. But they've got these projects, and basically they put these project packages together. And then they source a partner to in the same way that Core Scientific have asked CoreWeave to pay the capital to build these facilities for them, and then they'll pay it back. Soluna are going out there looking for partners to deliver money to actually get the capital of these projects undergo, and then there's a sort of a profit share at the back end of it. So it's really good. They as I say, from a self mining, that's just part of the business, and they mined 17 Bitcoin during June, and that's pretty much what they mined in May as well. They've got Project Dorothy 2, which is a 50 megawatt project. That's going to start commencing. Just had the funding agreed for that, so that starts the construction at the end of July, and it's going to be again with it's a Bitcoin hosting facility, and it's got milestones set for the next 6, 9, and 12 months, and the next one is a bigger one in Texas. They're looking at Project Catty, so they give all these projects names, and Project Catty is a 166 megawatt pipeline. And they're currently going through advanced discussions with ERCOT to get the progression of that project underway. And, it's all positive. They had a bit of debt on the balance sheet, but some of that's been reduced, by converting some of the debt to common shares. So again, they've had some shares increased on the 8th of July, reduce some of the debts. That's always good to see a company do that. I know, DR, that you've got them on your Spaces meetings. I think maybe August.
Yeah,
we've had John on the show, 3 or 4 times this year already. But as I say, I'll be probably tuning into that one there to see what further updates John can give, because John's been in the post now just over 12 months, and you can see the change in what they're doing. They're very transparent in terms of, if you go to their presentation, which is updated regularly, it gives you the breakdown of all the revenues from all the projects they're expected to achieve over the next year or two. And so you can see for yourself, for a company of that market capitalization, why are they delivering really, really good revenues? We talked about Cipher Mining having a cheap energy. Put Soluna in that bracket as well. Soluna's energy is under 3 cents a kilowatt hour. That means when they're hosting companies, they can charge a really low hosting fee because they can get a really decent margin because the energy price is so low for them. So they can make money out of hosting. I mean, people think when hosting's not a great business. Well, it is for some companies, and Soluna will be one of those because of the fact they have a great energy deal. Most companies have already said 4 to 5 cents a kilowatt hour. When you've got it under 3, it gives you extra capacity to make money with that cheap power if you've got the right project in place. So it'll be interesting. As I say, I'll tune into that Spaces meeting when DR and runs that in August. But yeah, looking forward to it.
Now, you talk about energy prices being a game changer, which I agree with, Anthony. Another game changer for BitDeer, and one that I wanted to touch on earlier, is their hardware component here. So we talk about the mining rigs and the efficiency associated. BitDeer's put out their technology roadmap, tracking towards 5 joules per terahash within the next couple of years here. BitDeer up 100% in the past 3 months. This is one that not a lot of people really follow. You can see, according to StockTwits here, only 1,500 people covering watching this ticker on their watch list, compared to 30,000 for Hut 8, for Hive, CleanSpark, Marathon. So curious, both of your thoughts quickly here on BitDeer Technologies and how they're positioning themselves compared to the peers.
I'd love to talk just really briefly. They have the largest disclosed exahash target for 2025 at 80 exahash. That's remarkable. Whether or not they achieve it, I don't know, but there's nobody else out there has a number like 80 exahash, and they're primarily doing it with their Seal Miner tech. Vertical integration, proprietary software, as Anthony mentioned earlier, potentially as low as 5 joules per terahash. To basically, this is a company that broke away from Bitmain, the co-founder, making their own tech, funding their own facilities to possibly get 80 exahash by next year. They got 2 gigawatts of energy under capacity, and they got a huge cash infusion from a private placement with Tether. I think there's a lot of reasons to be very bullish here about BitDeer in a nutshell.
Yeah, Anthony, I agree. I mean, one of the key things for me with BitDeer is the fact that they've got the diversification in that company all over. I mean, we talked about self-mining. They've got hosting. They've got cloud hash rate. They're going to be producing their own machines now. They've done all the testing, so they're now going out to production of these machines. They're going to focus on replacing their own machines first. In terms of megawatts, I don't think there's a company actively got as many megawatts that potentially are under development at the moment. We talked about IREN, but the 1.4 and the 1 gigawatt site haven't been touched yet. So that's a future aspiration. But BitDeer at the moment have got just under 900 megawatts in terms of what they're actively using, and they've got over 1.645 gigawatts of pipeline in facilities that they're building in the likes of Norway, Bhutan, Ohio, and Texas that are coming online over the next 2 years. And so actually, if they can get that production of their machines underway quickly and start growing them, replacing machines, building putting machines in their infrastructure as they come online, they could well reach that target. I mean, it all depends about production. That's one side, that they're going to have to, get to grips with it. I mean, I believe Bitmain also have companies that produce ASIC miners for them as well. And, Bitmain's valuation maybe not at the moment, but we had a discussion, a while back, and Bitmain's valuation was something like all the miners added together, their valuation as a total wouldn't be the size of Bitmain.
Yeah,
so
I remember that.
BitDeer going down this route now, and there'll be skeptics out there. Let's see what these miners. Their first generation miner that they brought to the table was 18 joules a terahash. Now that's about as good as Canaan, and they're the third biggest producer of mining rigs after Bitmain and MicroBT. So Canaan's best machine is about 18 joules a terahash at the moment. So when you're bringing out your first generation miner, which in subsequent generations you're going to improve on, they brought out a sort of an eye-watering 18 joules. Now we've seen that drop down. They're going to bring out one at 14, one at 10, one at 5. I mean, the 5 is probably more aspirational, but he was very clear, Jeff, when we had him on the podcast, that 10 is doable. They're already seeing now that can be doable. If they can achieve 10, and bear in mind, you're talking about these big sites. When you have hash rate, mining efficiency of 10 or 14 even, it means that you don't need the sheer size of facilities that mining companies have got at the moment. They can put more into less space because these new machines will be no bigger, but far more powerful. So if you compare, if they can get down to 14 or even 10, and compare that to an S19 that came out 2.5-3 years ago, you're looking at something that's nearly 3 times more efficient and as the same size. So by putting it into you don't need a warehouse that's the size of 4 Wembley football pitches.
Huge benefits.
You can do things. It's so the size of some of these sites will not be growing in correlation to the amount of hash rate that's increasing. If that makes it easier for people to interpret that.
Well, it's a real benefit for the industry, and we'll be seeing Jeff in Nashville there, Anthony, so we can pick his brain about the Seal Miner in person next week. Yeah. Now, last one of the day, you guys, I wanted to touch on SATO Technologies. They're another smaller company here. You can see at the time I took this, it was just opening market for the venture listed companies here. So $22 million market cap. Again, very similar to the other miners here. We saw a nice little jump over the last month as we've seen that renewed optimism in Bitcoin. But interestingly, with SATO Technologies, Anthony, really punching above their weight class here in terms of the production per exahash. So I'll bring up that table again, and maybe we can end out with a discussion on SATO Technologies.
Yeah. So they currently they had a bit of difficulty in the last month. They've had a fire at their facility, so they've only got the one site. So it's a 20 megawatt facility. They had about just over 0.55 exahash due to the fire, that they've only actually operated at 0.44. So effectively they lost 120 petahash. They thought it was about 10%, but that would suggest it's probably closer to 20% of the production. So they had a fire there. That's getting, the machines are getting fixed. The building's getting fixed as we're speaking now. So hopefully that can get back up there. The issue with SATO is, again, it's one of these small mining companies that's having difficulty growing in size because nowadays, debt is not a real opportunity for miners to go down the route. The market's not. It's still not educated in terms of what the miners bring to the table, and so we're still getting these high premiums for debt. So miners aren't going down the debt route. ATM would be a challenge for this company because the valuation there is 22 million in Canadian dollars. So again, it's quite a small valuation. And again, if you look at valuation by hash rate, you've got sort of like more than half an exahash of hash rate for, I don't know, it's 18 million, something like that in US dollars. So you could be looking at, 36 million US dollars per exahash. If Riot were looking to buy BitFarms at 100 million, then, I would expect some of these phones to be ringing, like certainly Frank and Aidan's phone at Hive Digital should be ringing with regularity, because their value cheap, and all the miners below Hive there would equally have very low valuations in terms of their exahash. So if these mining companies were looking to grow hash rate quickly by M&A activity, you could, and we go back to Riot and BitFarms. Why would Riot want to buy BitFarms? It's a company that's going to 21 exahash this year. You're not buying a 7 exahash company. You're buying something with potential to 21 exahash.
Yeah.
And that's the way, to go and find a site to build 21 exahash of hash rate now is going to be a challenge for any miner. So miners are going to be prepared to pay a premium, and that's what it is. We know if you can do it, go and buy the site and go and buy the machines and go and buy the power, and you can get it done, in 12 to 18 months. Go and do it, because it's going to be far cheaper to do that than buy a mining company. But you can't do it. That's the whole point. So
it'll be interesting to watch here over the next couple months, Anthony, as we start to see some of this expected consolidation, I suppose. But we've finished our list here, you guys. We did the full sweep of the mining sector. We've got Nashville coming up next week. We're looking forward to meeting as many subscribers as we can down there, hosting a meetup event in person with Freedom by 40, and hopefully a number of other members of the community here. In addition to that, very exciting news this week in the mining space in terms of the political environment, the economic environment, and Larry Fink reversing his stance on Bitcoin. DR, I'll hand it to you for any closing thoughts here as a special guest, but we appreciate your time today and insights into the miners as always.
Nothing really much to add that we haven't gone over. This was so enjoyable. I mean, honestly, I learned so much from talking to you guys and just love this space. It's been a lot of fun to get to learn. You guys have been some of the pioneers in this. I've been watching McNallie Money since before I started posting about Bitcoin. So this has been really cool to me. I just love coming on your space, and thanks for the time today.
Well, you're most welcome anytime you want. Anthony, your birthday coming up on the 23rd. A few people were asking if that's the big date, the big 35th.
I don't know, but actually, the week I was born, England won the World Cup, so that's a bit of a giveaway. So if you haven't worked out my age, you'll work it out fairly quickly from that his nose there. But probably look younger than I physically am. But yeah, it's a another birthday. Get to my age, don't worry too much about the birthdays. Just enjoy doing what we're doing in this space. Having a platform for people to start looking at some of the analysis. And as I say, we don't hear, we're not giving any financial advice to people. I don't give, stock quotes. We look at everything historically. So I'm an accountant, so I look at financial reports. I look at their monthly updates. I do everything historically. There's a lot of people out there that do the other stuff, the technical analysis, and they're good at it. So, I don't need to go into that space at all. But I'm very good at looking at the information provided, and then looking at the comparison of information from miner to miner, and seeing, from a current valuation perspective, which miners you want to do a little bit more due diligence. And this is a start point. You watch these types of podcasts, you look at the articles, you look at what we put out on social media. This is not your due diligence to go and buy a stock. This is a start point. If you like what you see, then take that information, take it a stage further, do some of your own analysis, follow the miners. I've been in this space for 4 years, and I'm starting to get to understand it now. So, it takes a while to get to a position where you really start to understand it. I've been very, very lucky to have, I've met literally every miner that we've talked about today in person. I'm in regular communication with literally every miner on that list there. I'm looking forward to catching up with many of them in Nashville next week with Bryce. It's just a great space to be in. You get invited to go to 2 of the biggest facilities in Texas, and be there for groundbreaking news. And it's just a great space. Ben approached us. We got nominated. We got told he was got the CEOs and came on the podcast the same day. He probably had 1,000 things to do that day, but by sticking at it for a long time, you get this sort of the payback comes back then from these CEOs, and they it means that they must enjoy some things that we're doing, and I'm just
hope
people enjoy it. But this is not us telling you to go and buy stocks. Let's make that very clear. I do this. I have a Patreon which people know my portfolio, and they can see when they get messages when I buy shares, when I sell shares. So that's all done through the Patreon. But I don't come on here to promote mining stocks or anything like that. There, we go through updates, we tell it as it is, and we give our opinion, and that's our opinion. And so DR does a very similar thing with what he does on his Spaces there. And as I say, it just gives you more and more information that you can then do something with that information. But it's a starting point. Do not expect it to be the end game.
Yeah, we can't do all the heavy lifting for you guys, but it's a great source of education, information. Anthony WP, one of our subscribers, he says he's going down to Nashville. He's got the first drink for your birthday there. So we'll end it there, you guys. Have a great rest of your day. It looks like the miners are starting to maybe turn a little bit more positive here. Not green, but a little less red, which would always be nice. And we'll continue to watch for any big headlines or press releases this week. If you're still watching, smash the like button, you guys. It's been a blast today. We'll see you same time, same place next week, the day before we leave for Nashville. And then, of course, we'll have a lot of exciting events, updates, and news to share with you at Nashville there in about, I guess, exactly a week or 8 days time now, Anthony. It's coming up quick. So have a great rest of your day, you guys. Leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you here tomorrow.